Welcome to another episode of the AV Experience. My name is Ryan, joined as always by Jonathan with special guest Bob Dieterle. Jonathan and Bob and myself and a gentleman, Nathan, I believe, all partook in an HDR10 versus Dolby Vision comparison. And this was subjective, to say the least. And it was done on two LG TVs. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. And that was a highly subjective, I would say, though we tried to be objective and eliminate variables. Experiment limited on one specific type of display and TVs only. We didn't get into projectors. But gents, how are you? I haven't seen you in like 2 days. So how have things been? We've coordinating colors, evidently. Bob did not get the memo.
Nope. Barely got the link, I think I heard.
Well, that was my fault. You know, you get a new laptop. Yesterday, the day of new laptop was, I'm not evidently the person that IT wants to give a new laptop. I opened it for the first time, and then at the top of the stairs, there it went.
Oh no.
Down the stairs. And it did like a perfect end over end, like spinning all the way down the stairs, which was probably, in all actuality, the best that could have gone because it didn't fall on the screen. And it's a MacBook, so it's all an aluminum, magnesium, whatever frame. And it survived with not a scratch.
Did you do this yesterday?
Yes. Yesterday evening, after I think somebody had just left and I was coming upstairs and it was a bad time. Like I hadn't even turned it on for the first time. You
just got it like 3 hours before that.
Didn't even get it, didn't even turn it on, and it fell down the stairs.
I've just come to the realization that we open every stream with like some self-deprecating humor, and I'm not sure if that's
my way.
Or if it's just our lives.
I don't know. It's probably our lives. But I think that if you can't self-deprecate yourself, you know, you're not having enough fun in the world. You're taking life far too seriously. And yes, in the moment, I was not happy. Like, I think I went upstairs and sat on in front of my bar, the countertop for a little bit and just sat there. Worried that as soon as I opened this laptop, it was going to be over.
I've had a few of those. When after the lightning strike, I sent my amplifier off to California to get it rebuilt, and they did an amazing job of it. But when it got shipped back, I watched I won't say which carrier it was. Watched the carrier truck pull up in front of my house and roll it down the stairs out of the truck.
I'm trying to imagine. Was just this like end over.
No, it was my PAS 250.8.
Oh man!
Oh my gosh!
They just tipped it up on the side and rolled it down the stairs out of the truck. And I'm just sitting there like watching in horror as this thing goes bouncing.
How much is that amp boy?
110 pounds, something like that.
And it's got a real absorbency for falls, doesn't it?
They pack that thing exceptionally well.
Oh, I was talking, regardless of the packaging, the amplifier itself, it's very springy.
I actually called them right after that, and before I even opened it back up, they're like, "Oh yeah, people drop those things all the time out of the trucks. It's fine."
Well,
I mean, I guess if there's a testament to packaging and build quality, that's it.
It is it.
Jonathan, has anything been dropped in your life recently?
I don't think so. I've had plenty of experiences in the past, but not in the last couple days.
Trying to think if anything else, any other laptops fell down. The only other most recent one was the speaker that got dropped off the back of a ramp. Like the lift gates, took a delivery, Martin Logan, F200s whip, and fell like 4 feet off the back of a truck. But I think we've talked about that already. Anything else happen in your guys' lives since I saw you 2 days ago?
No, I don't think so. Yesterday.
No? Was it? Well, I saw you yesterday. I didn't see Jonathan yesterday.
What were you guys doing another comparison yesterday?
Bob is a man of self-hatred and wants to come over and suffer with me. My house is just the perpetual home of suffering. Like, this is where it goes to live and it never leaves. I do it to myself.
He has all sorts of cool, nifty toys that are fun.
Nothing happened. It was actually good. Bob helped me out tremendously. We ran a new cable, a fiber optic cable, because we've been testing with, I did Celerity and then I broke that cable. or something happened and it got kinked because they're glass. They're not
Oh,
fiberglass. So they're really susceptible to kinking, or not kinking, but if you pull on them too hard, they'll just not work. So it died, and I wanted to test Fiber Commander. So I got Fiber Commander because I'm testing this is for Mad VR and for the industry to try to figure out what is going on with HDCP and EDID and all of the low bandwidth communications and AOCs, and why are we getting flashing? Why are we getting these HDMI artifacts? And is there a way, if somebody has to do a longer run, to not hate themselves as much? Because we've all been there in an HDMI issue and we're like, I hate myself. Why do I like this hobby? Why am I doing this? And I'm trying to save people. I am trying to I'm trying to embody the suffering and save people. I'm like the HDMI messiah. Okay. That's what I'm trying to do.
I feel like I'm in a drama class and the instructor said, you have to embody a frustration with HDMI. Go. You just...
This is me. Give me a topic. We make it happen. So we did that. We did the multi-viewer. Yes. So we got the multi-viewer running. So now if you put up content, and it fought us for a while because of that low bandwidth EDID, same thing, same self-hatred, and fought that for a while, got the EDID fixed. So now you can overlay smart in the cool thing about the multi-viewer from AV Pro Edge is you can actually move it. Like it's pixel by pixel. So you can put the images, it's a 4x4 multi-viewer. It's a 4 multi-viewer. I don't know how to word that. But you can move it and put it in each of them in any pixel position you want to. So we got that to work. So we had Kaleidoscape going with smart in a small thing in the bottom corner, or you can make them the same size, or you could do all different kinds of stuff. So we got that running. And that was super cool. And then we ran the cable.
Is it like on the multi-viewer thing, is it kind of like a Blackmagic ATEM board, like where you can overlay different sources on top of each other?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And it's also a switch.
A video switch.
Yeah, so I was just talking about how I hate HDMI. I just made my entire signal chain more complicating.
Well, at least you can loop out of it when you don't need it.
Yes, but HDMI doesn't care about that, and it'll poo-poo on me at a later time anyway. So we got that working, and then Chuck came over. He was picking up a projector. You know Chuck, Jonathan.
I do. Yeah,
he came over, was picking some stuff up, and gave him a demo. And then he went on his merry way.
Mm-hmm. You haven't heard how he likes it yet, or has he got it hooked up yet?
No news is usually good news. From a dealer, at least. I mean,
sure.
You'll have to text him and see what he thinks.
Yeah,
how he's going on. He got a Mad VR core too. So
nice combo.
Yes, he got a QB1000 and a Mad VR core, which is a very good combination. I think he's going to be very happy with that. Replacing a very early generation JVC. He said he was getting like 800 lumens.
Bulb time.
Like that. Yeah. He was not too happy with his HDMI negotiations, the handshake times. So the Epson's going to be much, much better with that. Bob went to Minsky's twice yesterday.
I did.
We had
pizza. Had it for lunch this morning too, or for lunch this afternoon too.
Was that at least leftovers, or did you go there again? Okay.
No, it was leftovers.
I mean, I had it for lunch today too, and dinner last night. So I'm right there with you, but I didn't go there twice.
The second time, it was carry out the second time.
You said the lasagna pizza?
Yeah, so Minsky's does a lot of like really creative, like kind of pizza of the month things, and so they're kind of hit or miss. Some of them are really good. Just depends on what you like. They have like a chicken spadini one that was not my favorite. They've got the Hunter's Double Back, which is like chicken and bacon and pepperoni and something else, and they really like a ranch dressing that goes on the top. That's an amazing pizza. But they have this lasagna pizza right now, where it's literally a pizza with like ricotta cheese and tomato sauce and lasagna noodles. There's actually noodles on top of it and Italian sauce. It was weird. It was not my favorite, but it did taste like a piece of lasagna on top
So
of a
to
piece of
some
pizza.
people, not their favorite is like tolerable.
Oh, I mean, I could eat a piece. It was not like the sauce was kind of mild, so it was sweet and didn't have a lot of heat to it.
So
it
it
was
was
just
Moscone sauce, whatever they use on the Papa
it
Minsky's.
might have been, but it was underwhelming. But it's what I should have expected it to be.
Okay. Because my son, if he says it's not his favorite, or if my brother says it's not his favorite, it's ghastly. It's awful.
No, it was definitely edible. It was a little weird. But they get like when they get the Joe's KC one in there, those are always really good.
Well, technically, arsenic is edible. You just die.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It's also organic.
That is true. It is organic. So you can feel healthy for the moments you have left if you eat enough of it. So let's talk about the topic, HDR10 and Dolby Vision. And to highlight it for everybody, I'm using them right now. It's two LG C3s. They're identical. They're the same size. They were bought at the same time. They have identical hours on them. They're identical. Same display. And we asked the community to see if they could find, or if anybody would let us use a Panasonic UB820. And Nathan, who's local here in the Kansas City group, offered and said we could use his UB9000, which was the flagship. It is the tippy top. And Jonathan brought over his UB420, and Bob brought over whatever monstrosity of a 1080p Blu-ray player he brought. He was like, "Oh, it's on the floor. Let me just grab that and bring it over." And brought it over, and I think it was a cup holder. But
was that in just case one of us forgot the player? Was that your intent, Bob?
No, it was in my e-waste box that I have not taken over to get recycled yet. And I was just like, oh, I'm going over to look at this, and here's the Panasonic Blu-ray player. I'll bring this for fun.
So we had those two, and then later we did the Apple TV against the UB9000, Dolby Vision against Dolby Vision, Stream Dolby Vision against Physical Media Dolby Vision. So I want to make sure that we clarify this. This is a subjective conversation. This is a subjective opinion. There weren't any measurements made during this. It was us just looking and trying to do a subjective test in an objective way. Okay. And this is specifically a comparison of Dolby Vision versus not Dolby Vision on televisions, not on projectors. So there very well may, because we haven't done this comparison yet, though we do want to, be a difference or not a difference on projectors. We just have not done that test yet. And we could have done something with the Christie, but I will come out and say it because there's a Christie Griffin in the Mad VR Experience Center, which is one of the best projectors, in my opinion, out there. But if you do not have a video processor out on it, it is awful.
But does the Christie even support Dolby Vision?
No, but
so
regardless, my point was, we can't even use it in the comparison because it is not good unless you put a video processor on it in any way, shape, or form. It is horrific on its own, which that's the expectation. You know, you get one, they expect you to do something with it. It's an expectation, I guess, of that company. Anyway, I digress. Let's jump into this. So we've got, I think last week we just decided that we were going to do this, and we use these displays. Now, what were your guys' initial thoughts going into this? What did you guys think? Jonathan, let's start with you. What did you think was going to be the outcome?
I thought there would be slight differences based on some of the stuff that I've seen, like Stop the FOMO test in the past, where he's kind of pointed out some differences and so forth. So I'm not going in here without knowing anything.
Mm-hmm.
I'll leave it at that for now because we're just talking about our preconceived notions.
Now, I thought there would be slight differences. What did he point out? Or
is kind of like where he was at too.
Like in what?
A lot of those different comparison videos where it's just like kind of subtle things. I'm not sure. I think they kind of sometimes pointed out things that were less subtle than what we were seeing yesterday.
He did, and Brian potentially.
Yeah, I don't know if I've watched Brian on that, but I've seen some Stop the FOMO stuff, and subtle is the right word. I think going in is what my expectations were.
Okay,
and I'll put that forward. Even I invited some other guys from the Kansas City group and 3 of them got back with me and like, "There's not going to be a difference. I'm not going to waste my time on that." So that was kind of the motif of some of the Kansas City crew thinking about this going in, that they would be subtle.
They
or not
wouldn't
at
even
all.
come out for our good time. They just were not even worth their time.
Yeah.
You
Well,
gentlemen are always worth my time.
I think it's always fun to experience it, even if you have your expectations. Like that's, yeah, it's good to know.
Yeah.
Bob, what was your opinion?
So my only experience with Dolby Vision has been playing around with the low latency Dolby Vision hack that you can do with the Vroom. Just because I use one as an audio extractor. So I had that and I played around with it a little bit just to try the low latency Dolby Vision stuff off of Disney Plus and Netflix. And honestly, there was not a massive difference and it just kind of wasn't worth doing. It wasn't an awakening experience. But I mean, you weren't really using any of the features of it. You were kind of using it to the base subset. So it didn't really have a massive effect in the time that I had tried it. So going into it with the full version, I actually didn't really have any preconceived notions. I was just curious if there was actually even a difference.
Now, Classy Tech in chat asked the question of what modes were used or were they calibrated?
We were using cinema mode because the cinema mode, when you switch the LG TV into Dolby Vision, it limits the modes that you can use. So we wanted to have a common out of the box mode. We factory reset both TVs before we did it. And we were using cinema home, whichever one it was. But it was the same mode with the same settings between the two TVs, reset out of the box with default settings.
Okay.
Now, and then we didn't leave them at default settings. We changed a few things. We turned off the energy mode, like settings, the echo,
the energy settings. The logo setting was disabled.
Yeah.
Brightness was set to 100%. Did we change anything else?
I think that might be it where we landed at the end of it.
Yeah.
Just default reset with the current firmware. Like there was nothing newer on both of them were updated the current firmware. And then we also made sure that the Panasonic players, so one of them, the 9000 was doing Dolby Vision and the other one was doing HDR, my 420. We aligned up the Panasonic settings. So we set them to the OLED where you have the display luminance setting, and they were both in HDR. Dolby Vision disables the HDR slider. So what we decided was we just verified that the 420 was in neutral position on the HDR slider. So it wasn't affecting it as far as just sending out what was raw.
Okay. I had a thing that I was going to say, and then I lost it. Do you think that we should have calibrated the displays? Because they were not calibrated. Do you think that would have made a difference?
We checked color just perceptively with the Spears and Munsil stuff at the end, and there was not enough of a difference between the two of them that
there really wasn't any difference.
There wasn't really any difference.
When we saw color differences, and we did on occasion, it seemed to be related to Dolby Vision versus the displays. Because when we weren't using Dolby Vision and we had them side by side, they looked really close, like close enough not really to care.
Right. We saw a few color.
Could that be the video mode or the mode that the display was in? Do you think that could have been related?
No, because when we checked the color on Spears and Munsil afterwards and looked at them perceptively, they were it was in the same settings. We didn't change those.
Yeah. So like I'm very much thinking about the Batman movie of the different ones we watched. There were some differences in there. Like the concrete was a slightly different color in some scenes. The door was a little bit different, had a little bit different representation, different presentation. But I think it was the technology more so than the display without deeper diving. Like the Dolby Vision versus HDR technology. It was doing a little bit something different, perhaps.
We weren't on the latest firmware. We were on the one that was previous. So there was one update available, but the two TVs were on the same. They were on the same version of the firmware, so we didn't update them.
You're right. I remember you saying that, but the numbers matched. Yes, we checked.
Yeah, we weren't on the one that just came out that has the AI features and things like that.
What content was used? Do you guys remember? Because I don't.
Oh yeah. We had a list of movies. We did 1917. We tried to do some dark stuff. We did Top Gun Maverick. We did Batman. I got the movies over here. Let me grab them.
Uh-oh. My camera decided it was going to go.
We did Top Gun Maverick. We did Batman. We did what do we have only one copy of that we swap back and forth?
What was that? That was
1917.
yes.
John
we
Wick,
went
1917, Spears and Munsil, Batman, No Time to Die. I think I ended up with your Spears and Munsil or something. So how do I have 2 copies here?
Then you have my Spears and Munsil.
Yeah.
Thief!
And then Top Gun Maverick. Yours had a corner chewed out. Maybe I grabbed Nathan's because this one doesn't have a corner chewed out of it.
Nathan didn't have one. It was Ryan's.
Huh.
It was just
Sure enough, it's the 03. I have the 04. You have the 03, like a previous model I must have grabbed.
Oh, you must have taken one of them and I have the other, maybe? Is it even still there?
Yeah, it's the thinner. This one's thinner. Sorry, I sure didn't mean to do that.
All of my stuff's gone. I see how it is. You guys just go over here to just take away party favors. All right. So the first one we looked at was Batman.
Yes.
How did that go? How did it start? Bob, let's start with you. So we kind of went through some things. We had some trouble getting things in sync.
We played, after playing remote musical chairs for a while. The really big difference is that, we spent 10 minutes looking at a girder and a wall and some lights, and some minor chroma differences were the big, kind of really big things that there was between them. There was not much else beyond that. They were very close to identical. The only other thing that I'd say as kind of note, it was like the HDR version was slightly brighter, but like one step higher on an HDR slider than the Dolby Vision.
Now, when you say that, the overall scene luminance,
the overall scene luminance, yes,
once
it was like pumped once.
Okay, so no matter what we looked at, Bob is conveying that every scene we looked at, the HDR10 display looked like it was just a little bit brighter.
Mm-hmm.
And that led, in my opinion, to things looking, or could potentially get blown out and or crushed. Now, there were only a couple times that we noticed that in like whatever that guy's headlight piece.
Yes, when they were
Batman,
when they were shining the flashlight in his eye when he was on the floor.
Is that what that was?
That's what it was.
I've yet to see that movie. So saw it there. Did you guys notice any other times when things were getting blown out?
No, but that one's not a terribly bright movie besides that particular point.
No, I'm just using that as an example.
Well, not in Batman. In later on content when we were purposely trying to make differences, yes.
Okay. Jonathan?
I think Batman was probably the one that showed the most difference, and even then it was subtle. Like we were talking about, if you left the room and came back in, would you know which one was which? And I think for the most part, we were kind of thinking like it's close enough, it'd be hard to tell. Until we got to the Spears and Munsil disc, and that was kind of across the board, right? With all those different movies that we tried.
I wanted to talk about my girder.
All right, let's go.
No, I didn't really. It was the only thing that came up there was we were seeing color differences, and in some things there was a door that we noticed a little bit of banding going on, but we really had to look really close at that in order to be able to see it. And then the other one, the Dolby Vision version, you didn't really see any of it. So that was a little showcase of things being elevated and not looking right. And the Dolby Vision version looked more correct. So I will say that subjectively, Dolby Vision technically, or not technically, but subjectively, to my eye, overall in Batman, looked better. But when I say it looked better, I mean, I'm chasing fractions of percentage points. And if you changed it, and there was only one display going on, and then I came back in and you asked me which one's on, I'd have no idea.
Yeah, it'd be pretty hard.
No clue. So were there any dark differences in there? We know, I think things were the color elevated.
The colors in the concrete were the kind of the shift, because what I might have these backwards, was that the HDR10 one that had the slight red shift, and the Dolby Vision one looked more slightly greener.
I think so.
I don't know which one was true.
The left one seemed a little bit more red in presentation sometimes than the right one when we were in those respective modes. And that was definitely that way. HDR on the left, Dolby Vision on the right. Now, that being said, we weren't comparing HDR10 plus. We were comparing HDR10 for what it's worth. So
LG doesn't support HDR10 plus.
Right.
Yeah. I've heard, I've read, I've watched on some YouTube clips that sometimes people think the pendulum swings the other way, that there's a slight favorable advantage to HDR10 plus once you get past HDR over Dolby Vision. So it's like, I think Dolby Vision has a tiny edge over HDR, and HDR plus 10 plus has a tiny edge over Dolby Vision. That's how most of the reviews I've seen read out.
Okay. So the next piece of content we went to was...
We did 1917, but one disc at a time because we didn't have two copies.
That's right. So 1917, and we were looking at the staircase scene, so waking up. And what did you guys think? Jonathan, we started with Bob last time. Let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, one of them was a little bit brighter, I thought, but they weren't side by side, so I'm going to say that with a little bit of caution. But I felt like the HDR was a little bit brighter.
Elevated again.
Yeah. Where it's just like everything in the scene is just raised 5-10%, something like that, maybe even 15%, but just a little bit brighter, where you can see a little bit more detail on kind of some of the ancillary things that are off to the side of the main character. Both of them looked really good, and made me lament that we use projectors sometimes, because like that scene looks so much better on OLED than it does on a projector, in my opinion.
Jonathan said that next week he's going to sell his projector and go buy a TV.
No, they got to get bigger, but I'm game when they do.
So Bob,
same thing. Other than the fact that now there was the caveat that we streamed it, but we'll talk. I assume you want to cover that at the end.
Yeah, let's go to that. That was a different section entirely. So
we'll come
let's
back to that.
Okay. Yeah, with just the disc side by side, it was the same thing. I mean, it was like you tick the HDR slider up by one. There was no real perceptible differences between the two other than that. Once you got outside and the highlights started happening, the differences kind of went away and you noticed them less.
Now, moving on from 1917, we went into, was it Spears and Munsil next?
Yes.
Okay.
I think so.
Spears and Munsil is, for anybody that doesn't know, in the case of what we were doing, a torture test. Like if you're going to notice something, it's going to be in Spears and Munsil, because we were pushing the displays to their absolute limits. And what I mean by limit is we were raising the mastering levels for the content to 10,000 nits. So the demo material, you have the ability in Spears and Munsil to choose the mastering level. There's several different mastering levels, and we did go through most of them. We started at 10,000 nits, and we compared that against Dolby Vision, which I think it only gives you 10,000 nits.
No, you could
Dolby
choose
Vision 10,000 nits, and then it doesn't give you like any. It's locked in at that point.
No, so when you choose the content itself, you can choose the 6,000, 600, 1,000, 2,000, or 10,000 master, and then you choose which setting you want before. So we had picked Dolby Vision on the Dolby Vision one. We picked HDR on the other one and set its respective level. And then we went down and chose the content. So the content was the same between the two of them.
Well, if I remember correctly, the Dolby Vision one was at the top of the Spears and Munsil list, and HDR10 was down here, and you had 10,000.
Right. So when you selected you did the
blah.
side select next to HDR10, you could pick the
you
level.
Could do that, but HDR10 or Dolby Vision did not give you that option.
Dolby Vision locked you out. But when you played the content, you could play the 10,000 nit master still.
Yeah, you had to. That was the only option it gave you. So what did you guys notice there? Start on 10,000 nits. Bob?
Horrific. Just everything was blown out. Between the first big one was the blizzard that wasn't a blizzard.
We're gonna have a little bit of a back and forth here, but
Jonathan liked the blizzard.
I know Jonathan liked the blizzard. There was a snow scene early on. Well, the first thing you kind of saw was the mountains were blown out, the clouds lost all the detail. But the biggest thing was there was some what were they, elk or something standing in a field, and then there was a snowstorm going on with some trees on that. Were they horses?
They were horses.
They're horses. Okay.
HDR10 was so bad, Bob couldn't even tell what they were.
I can't remember. They were standing in the snow. One had like a branding of like 417 on its hip or something.
192, I think.
Was it?
I think so.
Yeah, it had a brand on it. Anyway, in the back there were a whole bunch of trees, and on the Dolby Vision one, you could clearly see the trees through the snow. You could make out kind of the individual snow, the depth of the field. And on the HDR, it was like you were just looking out into a blizzard. Everything washed out within 10 feet of the camera view. just because there was so much content.
Yeah, you couldn't see anything of what was going on in the snow.
The
It would
number
actually be.
The number is
Go ahead.
149. I just looked it up. So take all of our observations with a grain of salt because
What was
we're
the
not
number?
remembering the number 149.
He got the 4 right.
I got
4 was
417. I
correct.
was close. I had a.
So, but Jonathan, what was your opinion on it?
So I differed from both of you a little bit, and that's okay. But I felt like the Dolby Vision, when they were skewed to the 10,000 nit content,
Mm-hmm.
it was blown out a little bit. I agree, but I actually kind of liked it because I felt like it's kind of what your eyes see. If you're exposed to very bright light, you're in an extremely bright situation. There's snowfall. It's the middle of the day. The way those extreme tone mapping things work, and Dolby Vision's not extreme, but it is in that same concept. It de-escalates the brightness of the scene down so that you can see more, as well as making more detail there. The whole brightness comes down. So the screen on the left is brighter, like just brighter. And to my eyes, especially like on the sunset and some of the stuff that like was blown out a little bit, like you lose some detail, but it's how my eyes see that in the real world. So I'm not find a happy medium maybe between what Dolby Vision was doing on that one and what HDR was doing on that one, because I don't think Dolby Vision represents what I see in real life on that particular.
Jonathan is a
horse
proponent
scene.
of torch mode, evidently.
I can tolerate a little bit of like highlight clipping because I think it's what my eyes see. Not as much as what we saw there in the 10,000 nit display, but more like in the 1,000 or the 600 nit display.
Mhm.
When you see that clipping, that's what my eye sees in real life. I don't
So
want to
how
remove all clipping.
How I see that is Dolby Vision is not sacrificing the overall scene brightness for detail.
But it did.
It didn't. It
The
did
whole
not.
scene, I have pictures. The whole
But
scene went down. And
if
it got
you
kind
do-
of a little bit of a green cast.
If you do the same thing on the HDR10 display, what ends up happening to get that detail back, you will be dimmer than the Dolby Vision display. So you're maintaining in the Dolby Vision display, you're maintaining your spectral highlight brightness, but
Mhm.
so that bright point is still able to get to that bright point, but if the display is capable of doing that. But on the HDR10 one, it was clipping everything, right? It
Mhm.
was blown out. It was, and we perceive, or a lot of people perceive, a brighter image a lot of times, and this is why big box retailers do this, as more attractive.
Mhm.
So when I go skiing and stuff, how I see this is when you step out of the car and you're first on the ski slopes, it is really bright. And I would agree with you, Jonathan, that
Mhm.
it does look blown out. But given your eyes time to adjust, I can see those details after my eyes have acclimated to that brightness.
Sure.
And I
Or
would
you
think it
wear-
would go,
Or you
well,
go out and
I'm
put on
not wearing
You put on
goggles.
amber lenses like you should on a ski
Okay,
slope.
I'm
so
not
you
doing
block out
that
reflected
because
blue
that
light.
would be cheating. That's like saying, all right, guys, we're going to watch a movie with snow in it. Put your goggles on so we can get a true to life representation of what's going on. So you're sacrificing your spectral highlight detail or your spectral highlight brightness in order to get the brightness of the overall scene. The display, in my opinion, just doesn't know what to do with it. It's too bright. And as we dropped the HDR10 nits, the mastering level, we saw that detail start to come back. But when you compared it to the other horses, it started to change where the horses for Dolby Vision were then brighter than the HDR10 one.
And they picked
in
up a
order
color
to
shift.
get that detail back.
Even in
Yeah.
color tones. Yeah,
Yep.
the horses had more color.
It's a
on the Dolby
sacrifice
Vision.
that you're making because
Right.
the HDR10 frankly doesn't know what to do with it. So were there any other, we kind of got in a little bit of a squabble later about the Yellowstone stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And
It was the sun.
sunsets.
Yep.
The sunsets. Jonathan was very adamant about the sunsets. And there was some.
If we showed you pictures on my phone, you guys would think we're crazy arguing about such things. It's pretty subtle.
The
looking at
horses
these
were not
pictures on my
subtle.
phone right
That
now.
was like Blizzard versus Flurry.
That was at 10,000
Yes.
nits. There was a
Then
big
we
difference.
spent
Okay, I'll phrase it this way. It's like what you see and then your eyes adjust. I felt like when I was looking at the Dolby Vision horses, it felt more like I was wearing like what you would see if you were wearing a pair of shades or sunglasses when you're out in that kind of snow versus what you actually see with your naked eye.
But we also don't know the director's intent. So what
Mhm.
Stacy's intent was when he took the image.
Mhm.
So there's that too. But what did you guys notice as we started dropping the mastering level?
Even as we dropped the mastering level, certain things still looked a little bit blown out towards the high end of the spot highlights, like that flower in the later part
Mhm.
of the scene, where it looked really similar as the light increased on the 1000 nit version until it kind of got blown out at the very end. But we did the 600. I don't think there was enough of a difference.
I think there was a difference, but it didn't look bad.
You had to really hunt for differences in
It
600.
was different. The stick looked virtually identical at 600 nits.
Yep.
So I guess what we're saying here, guys, is that there's not a lot of difference as long as you play within the realm of the capabilities of the display. And most content is not going to be mastered. I don't know if any content is mastered at 10,000 nits. I think the highest is like 4 or maybe 5,000 that I've ever seen, and I don't remember exactly what piece of content that was. But I think a lot of it comes down to, at least with displays of this caliber, it doesn't make much of a difference. Now, I saw Classy Tech mention if a display is less capable, especially in the luminance department, it's potentially going to make more of a difference. And I would agree with that. Like, the less capable the display is and then its own tone mapping, LG's tone mapping seems to be pretty good. If it's not capable, like I've seen some displays be not capable, it's really bad. And even when it's really bad, typically that goes hand in hand with the panel not being very good and there's no recovering. Like software, you're not going to fix hardware issues. So let's talk about, I talked a little bit about dropping the brightness. Is there anything, did they ever look identical? I don't think they did. In Spears.
No, in Spears, no. There was even when it came down to the lower, even when we were at levels that were below what the display was capable of, there was still a color shift. And like the colors just looked washed out on the HDR version versus the Dolby Vision version. We saw that in, was it some Fire? What was that in?
1917, wasn't it?
That was when we were doing streaming, though.
Yeah. Yeah. Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, in Spears and Munsil, they always looked probably a little bit different when you got to something that was specular highlights. Like in the lower, so for instance, Yellow Rose that you had talked about, at the lower, as that scene comes on, it's a lower brightness, and as it goes on, it's like the spotlight that's shining on the rose is getting brighter and brighter and brighter. When it's at the lower end of the spectrum on the light, on the luminance, they're not very different, or maybe even not different at all.
No, they looked very identical. Even the honey drip, for the most part, looked very much the same,
except the stick.
Except you lost a little bit of detail where it's on the right side where the spotlight's hitting it and it gets a little blown out, and you lose some detail on that one.
I really care about the stick. Okay, guys, it's very important. It broke my immersion when I lost it. I would agree that and this was as I expected. As things got brighter, you lost detail. HDR10 blew things out, and Dolby Vision was able to maintain the detail throughout. But what I have seen in the past, given my experience with Mad VR, is that a lot of times, to the untrained eye, people will gravitate, even the trained eye, to a point, will gravitate towards the brightness. They even though you're losing potentially the detail, they like the brighter color and white effectively. It's like a moth to a flame, right? You're drawn to the brightness.
We had a similar situation like that at M-Wave this year with the streaming bitrate comparison, where a lot of people...
Oh, I didn't hear about this.
Oh, yeah. So initially, a lot of people actually preferred like 320 kbps over high res.
Really?
Now you're talking music now.
I'm surprised they could even tell a
yes.
difference at that point.
It was quite different in a lot of stuff. And so, and
Mainly
even
the
some
dynamic range, wasn't it?
the dynamic range, and you wind up clipping out a lot of what it came down to is what people were choosing that one over the high res, as because it was we were doing it was we were playing two different. I had my title account set up on both computers, and the bit rate set differently between the two of them. And so we had a physical A/B switch that we were switching between the two systems, and I'd play it, and sometimes we'd switch. Well, not on that one. We'd switch every time. And I got done at the end. And I just asked him which one you thought was the high res one. And most people, when they started a session, would say that the lower bit rate was the high res one because the vocals were clearer. And it's because you compressed out all the other part of the music to make that mid range more present. And so they're focusing more in the mid range. They could hear more of the vocals, but they lost so much more of the content. You had the low thumping bass, and you had the mid range clarity, but you didn't have any of the additional part of the information. They said the other one sounded noisier, but after one or two times of listening to it, everyone could easily pick out which one is which. It's all subjective which one you prefer. If you like that way the music's presented, that's perfectly fine. But most people don't know what the difference really is because they don't even listen to it. And it was really easy to pick out. And once you've been told what the difference between the two of them was, you could easily identify it. Whether or not that's your subjective preference, but there was a noticeable difference between low bit rate and high bit rate. We couldn't do really high bit rate because the Wi-Fi in that area is very bad, and I couldn't go above Redbook just even to play it. It would buffer too bad. But when you really drop the bit rate down, you could tell the difference every time. There was no issue where it was like we couldn't tell the difference between the two tracks. It was a subjective preference on which one you preferred.
Interesting.
And that's just the way they use the compression algorithms. I mean, there's not, they were probably done off the same master, but they were compressed different ways.
Well, where did you guys get your sources? Like, what was the 320? You said
it was all off title. We did 320, and I think I did the next one down, which I'd have to go back and open the title app and see.
256.
It was in the title app. All it was from the title app.
Yeah, so title allows you to select the bit rate that you stream at. And so, yeah, I had one computer set up with streaming at one bit rate, and the other one set up streaming at the other bit rate.
So audio quality, low, you can choose between 320 and 96, and then high is 44.1 kilohertz, 16-bit, and max is 24-bit, 192 kilohertz.
If you went down to the lowest one, it was pretty apparent as far as being able to tell a difference. At 320, the differences started to disappear. You could subjectively find them, but once you got to 1692, once you got to 1644, no, I don't think you could tell the difference. We had a little bit that buffered and played right, but it was hard. And we let people choose whatever music they were comfortable with listening to. So it wasn't, I'm going to throw something out that you've never heard. Here's something that you're familiar with, so that you can try to make a opinion on something that you're at least familiar. And then because people were choosing music, they got to listen to other people's music. So they had both familiar and unfamiliar titles.
Okay. Now moving on that segue to the streamed Dolby Vision. Because we changed and we did the Apple TV with streaming Dolby Vision content versus
the first thing we did was 1917 Dolby Vision off the disc versus HD Netflix. 1917 Netflix, because it wasn't in UHD.
Yes. How did that turn out?
The HD one looked bad.
It looked very bad.
I was surprised it looked as bad as it did, actually. Yeah. So you got the compression artifacts in any of the black areas on the screen. You got some haziness that happens in those black things. I mean, just like it's like macro blocking and haziness and all that kind of stuff in black.
The pixelated blocks.
Almost like I'm trying to remember if the motion artifacts we saw, was that only on the HD, or was that also in the 4K version where we saw a little bit of motion artifacts, like on the rail of the
No, I think that was only in HD. And to be fair, to be clear though, we were doing Netflix first.
Mhm.
So the other one we'll talk about in a minute. But the
Mhm.
Netflix one, it wasn't just blacks. When the flare went up after he got outside and plumed, you saw all of those artifacts in the sky. So it was,
and the column, the white archway,
Mhm.
just blew out completely, and you lost all detail in it.
Yeah, it was really bad. And so I think there's absolutely something to be said for streamed content. Streamed content in general, I think, given what we've saw, at least from the big apps like Netflix or Prime or any of those, I think you're much better suited going to physical media. And this was only the visual sense, and this was on a 42-inch display. So it very well could have been different if we had these on an enormous screen, because I think I mentioned this on Thursday when we did this, that it's like if you're watching a football game, right? If I'm watching the football game on a TV in my living room, bedroom, or on one of these displays, if I'm streaming it from, say, YouTube TV, it looks fine. It doesn't look necessarily bad. I can hunt for those artifacts, and I can see them if I'm close enough. But then if you get up in the Mad VR Experience Center and I turn that same game on a 160-inch display, awful. And it's so easy to see. It's the same stream, and it looks horrific. So there is that caveat that we may not be seeing things because the display is too small. And this is highly subjective. We weren't really pixel peeping. I mean, we were looking at stuff from a distance where I'm not going to go hunting for things because I'm never going to do that in a visual immersive experience. Like, I'm not going to be 2 inches away from the screen going, see that pixel? Like, I'm not going to do that. So I don't want to do that during the testing.
But we weren't across the room either, per se. We were probably like 6 feet away or something.
From a 42-inch display, though. I mean, yeah, but I agree. So now, once we took it from Netflix to Movies Anywhere and Vudu against the UB9000, did things change?
We did the Bond movie, and we did
1917 again and Top Gun.
No, we didn't do 1917 again because we didn't have it.
I thought we did do it.
I thought that was the one we couldn't find because we had to find the stuff that we'd use Jonathan's account to get into stuff. And then you had the code for the Bond movie.
Yeah.
And I think Top Gun was on there too. I think those were the only two we did.
Maybe I don't remember the specific order.
I thought we did it.
Maybe we did do 1917 because we did do something with fire. I thought, was that in 1917 or was that in Fury or was that in?
We didn't do Fury.
Was that in Bond? Where was that bonfire?
That was 1917.
Okay.
My takeaway in summary, when you got all those different things, because we did watch a lot of content, was the 1080p was much worse than I expected, and the 4K was close enough that, for the most part, in most scenes, it was good enough. Like you could see some things here or there, but it was close. That was closer than I expected. So worse than I expected for 1080p, and better than I expected for 4K.
You had to really hunt on the streaming 4K content to find a difference.
I don't even know that we really could identify a difference.
I'm trying to remember where that motion artifacting was, because that was something that was
that was in Bond
by my eye. But was that when we were doing the 4K stream?
Oh, it was the 4K stream.
No, that was. I remember you were talking about the frame rate looked different in Bond. I remember.
Yeah,
and that is absolutely true.
Some tearing and stuff was happening on the streamed version versus the disc version did not have that.
Yeah, and I think that's true with any streamed content. If the bit rate is not high enough, if there's fast enough motion going on the screen, you're going to see that tearing. Absolutely. And those motion artifacts and stuff that will absolutely.
And then maybe with stark lines and stuff too, because when we watched the Top Gun one, I didn't see motion tearing in that one, at least the clips we had watched.
I think a big part of that, though, was the background, and a lot of that was just blue sky.
Just, not.
So there wasn't as much moving that it was able to leave it the same, and the bit rate didn't need to be as high for that particular part of content.
On Top Gun, I couldn't remember noticing a difference other than when the plane flew through the explosion of the other plane. there was a little loss of detail in that explosion plume on the
See, I
streamed
didn't
content.
even notice that.
I didn't even notice that.
I remember you pointing that out, but I didn't see it.
Other than that, no, there was no difference.
I mean, we were looking at the face tones of the pilots because they got those close-ups on their
and
faces.
like wrinkles and
they're side by side,
pores and all that, and I couldn't
see a difference.
Paused, and we were going back and forth. Like, does that look different? Does that look? And no, I couldn't see anything that I could tell. Now, maybe if we got them on a bigger screen, maybe there would be a difference. But we didn't see anything, or it was limited. The motion would have been, I think, the biggest offender in those, like what we saw in Bond. Anything else?
I don't think so in that regard.
No,
Jonathan?
but so just for clarity for people kind of watching that was not really comparing the HDR tone mapping. That was just comparing streaming of Dolby Vision versus disc of Dolby Vision. So wrapping that up, that's how we finished our evening of comparison.
But they look the same. So I think even if you did that against HDR10, your conclusion would be the same.
Well, we had the question. We did have the question if Dolby Vision has some sort of. I had the question, some sort of minimum bit rate that, like, to achieve Dolby Vision, they're saying you have to hit this threshold or we're not going to offer it, type thing. And I don't know if they do or don't. But the whole purpose of their functionality, their label, is that they're kind of making standards. So
1917 definitely didn't.
But that was the HD stream, right?
Yeah, still,
it was the HD. That was the standard HD stream off Netflix. So it wasn't even the UHD stream.
I know, but it still was bad.
Yes.
Wasn't it Dolby Vision though? It was still
it was just straight HD because we looked at that afterwards trying to figure out why it looked so bad.
Okay. Well, and it would have been on the left-hand side, which was connected to the streamer, versus the right-hand side was connected to the Dolby Vision disc.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I think the next thing we need to do is audio. Streamed audio.
Well, the better way to do that. Well, maybe not. I mean, to your point, I guess I was going to say there's plenty of things out there on Reddit and everywhere where they're using software to see that it's stripping out bass on streamed versions, like the compression is taking out lowest bass.
I can tell you objectively now.
Yeah. Who do we know that has some sort of measurement tool where we could watch that in real time?
But it would be interesting to see if we could hear it. Because, I mean, yes, we can measure it and tell you it's lower, but it would be interesting to know if people can hear it.
We should do that with stream versus disc movies or stream versus kaleidoscope movies as well.
Because the spectrograph will tell you.
Yep.
And it's so, to be clear to everybody, now in the MadVR Experience Center, I have an Earthworks measurement microphone that is hidden in the theater, and it's connected back to my home server, and it's connected to Smart. And it will give you, so I'm not analyzing the data before it goes into the room for what the digital data is. It is actually what is in the room. So whatever the speakers are putting out, there is a spectrograph. So it's a real-time, effectively, intensity of a particular sound at a given frequency. And then there's an RTA. So we can see both of those in real time, and we can overlay those on top of content. So I think it'd be very interesting to look at the streamed content versus physical media, and even like Kaleidoscape, and see what those are actually doing. I think that'd be super interesting, in my personal opinion. Maybe more so than this, because that's what I think a lot of people talk about, is that there may not be a difference in video, which is what we all expected, unless you have some heinous thing like the HD version of 1917, which very well could have been an unaccounted variable with just that particular version or however it was being streamed. Not very much of a difference on the video, and there is more of a difference potentially in the audio. Do you guys agree? What you've heard or experienced?
Certainly. I remember Godzilla versus Kong or something. One of my friends.
Your favorite movie?
I hate those. My friend came over and wanted to watch it in my theater because he loved the movie so much, and I didn't have the disc. I love it too. And so we watched on streaming, and he goes, "That's kind of disappointing. I was expecting more." I was like, "Well, it is streaming." And then at one point, I rented the disc, and it was dramatically different, like way more low end feel and Godzilla thumping around and stuff. So. Yes.
Your favorite monster.
And then I went and looked it up on like a Reddit thread, and it's cutting off like everything below 30 hertz on the streaming version versus the disc that has quite a bit more down low. Mm-hmm. So it's scientifically not the same. And if you're used to having that low end stuff, it's not the same in person either. I feel like since we've had enough time with these subs that produce the low frequencies, we should be able to tell. And if we can't, we probably have mud on our face. But I guess that should be tested
next week.
Maybe next month. How about
Next
that?
month.
We already got
We're
another
getting the
thing this month
holidays.
with you. We got the Mad
Yeah, we
VR
do, don't we?
experience. Yeah.
This month.
Yes.
Yeah, in 2 weeks from today. 2 weeks from today. So, in conclusion, what do you guys think? Was there enough of a difference to make it worthwhile, given, I'm going to put some caveats or some precursors in here, given that you have a decent display, and we're limiting this to TVs, do you think it's worth it? Do you care?
With the mastering level of most current content, no. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's how it's going to stay.
And to make sure that people understand these are subjective opinions, because we didn't measure bupkis.
Right. I mean, because most content's not mastered at 10,000 nits or 5,000 nits or 2,000 nits. So if your TV can display brighter than the content that you have, I mean, Dolby Vision is not going to do anything. But from Spears and Munsil, when it was mastered way above what the TV or the display was capable of, there was a dramatic difference.
But even then, when we got it down to what the display could do, there still was a difference. So I think part of that, in my opinion, is...
But not to the point that the other ones were.
Yeah, is to a limit. You're also at a limitation of whatever the display's tone mapping is. And is it up to snuff? Because I think if you put, and this would be another interesting test, if you put that content like Spears and Munsil on an LG, a Samsung, and a Sony, I bet you they'd all be wildly different, especially in the colorful stuff and what they were doing with color. Maybe the hue shift would be different. I don't know. Jonathan, what do you think? Do you think Dolby Vision is worth it, or do you care?
On the TVs, with the settings we were using, I wouldn't care. But I wonder if I would care if we were using a projector that's not capable of 1,000 nits or doesn't have as good of HDR tone mapping. Like, would we care more?
Okay.
And Bob, I'd be curious to learn more about your experimentation with when you were doing your LLDV testing. Was that on your Epson, your 5040, or was that on your JVC NZ8?
NZ8, yeah. It was on
NZ8. Yeah. Seeing that device already has pretty good tone mapping. Like, I wonder if you tested on the 5040 or something that didn't have very good tone mapping at all.
If you ever want to do it, my 5040 is lying on the floor.
I think that could be.
What else do you have on the floor?
I only have ever had 2 projectors.
So yeah. I mean, the reality is the tone mapping probably doesn't have to work very hard if it's already matching what's natively made for. And OLED's 800 nits or so it's not that different from the 1,000 nits that most of this content is mastered for.
Right. And I'm also I'm using the static tone mapping on the Xbox on top of it. So I rarely use the tone mapping on the JVC.
You turn it off?
A lot of times I do watch with it off so that I can have faster performance.
Fair. So to summarize, Bob thinks it's not worth it, given a good display, and Jonathan thinks it's not worth it. And
we're not even talking like this isn't a big price, right? Because the player you can get a 820 Panasonic player for $400, $450, and you can get a 420 for $200 or $250. So we're talking a couple $100.
Or you get an Xbox for that same price, and the Xbox supports it too.
Yeah. So are you guys? Are we saying that it's not worth it for $200? Is that where we're laying the line down?
I think what I'm saying is you don't need to chase things and assume that just because it's not Dolby Vision, it's not good.
Right.
I think that's the nomenclature I'd like to say, is that Dolby Vision, if you have quality equipment, it doesn't mean, it's not a stamp that says this is going to be way better than if you watched it without it. I'm not seeing it. I mean, there was minute differences, and if you watch Spears and Munsil on repeat at 10,000 hertz and that's what you watch to put yourself to sleep, then yeah, probably it's worth it. But if you don't, and you're watching something like Batman 1917, Top Gun, any normal like off the shelf movie, I don't think it's necessarily enough. I think there are absolutely things that will make a difference. Like I wanted to see Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, the magic, because I think when you get into those really bright things, you can absolutely see a difference.
But isn't that also in that one because there's an issue with the metadata on that disc?
I have no idea.
I thought there was some problem with the underlying thing on that disc, which throws off a lot of tone mapping issues.
No idea.
Or that was something that got thrown around a whole bunch in the past. But yeah, that's a really hard scene to show on a lot of displays.
So I think on projectors, it's a different story. I'd like to do the experiment. And I think given what's being talked about a lot, this is a good segue into another topic, because we actually, after this all wrapped up, we had a conversation about this and watched a video in the Experience Center on it.
Before you go there, Ryan, can I share some pictures that I took the other night on the previous topic?
No. Yes.
1 second. Because I think we won't go into them very deep, but I want to do a little bit of sharing here. So share, and then window, and then here. Okay, so let's go here. Where is it? Here. They start here. So this is, I mean, the camera's not going to pick this up very good, so this might be a waste of time. But here's the HDR and here's the Dolby Vision on the right. You can see that there's a little bit of a banding that was happening on the HDR on the door in Batman that we like freeze framed. So is that showing up guys, on your side?
You're going to need
to you need to open the picture. You're on your...
Oh, it's not showing it?
No.
You have not opened the picture full screen. We're seeing your file explorer.
We see your library.
That's real strange. Okay, stop sharing. We'll try it again. Share screen, entire screen. Maybe that's what I did wrong.
Now we're in Inception.
Okay. So here's that. So here's that banding. Do you see that now? Is that showing up? Is it showing the picture now?
Yes.
It's showing the picture now.
So we'll go to the next one. Here's a cityscape. So this is Batman. On the right, Dolby Vision. On the left, HDR. On this particular scene, we couldn't tell a whole lot of difference, if I remember right? I mean, especially after we changed that one setting. Do you remember the name of that setting?
It was some detail enhancer on the... I can't remember what it was called. My TV's upstairs, so I can't look at it right now.
As we poured through the menus, fellas, we realized that there were two settings that Dolby Vision and HDR changed by virtue of them being on. HDR, we reset these TVs to start. Both of them totally reset. HDR, when it went in mode, it changed the color saturation to 60 instead of 50. Dolby Vision left it at 50, which is the default. And then Dolby Vision turned, was it off or on? Some other detail enhancement?
It turned off that detail enhanced thing by default. But we did it both off and on, and there was not a lot of difference.
Well, we did identify in Batman and, well, this is still Batman, that there was a shadow difference.
Yep.
It was darker. There was a difference in contrast. Things were darker. And then when we changed those settings, they looked virtually identical.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the difference between how those modes default out of the box were done by the manufacturers.
Do you know what nit level that was at on that sunset?
I'm going to assume this is one of the lower nit levels because it doesn't look as blown out as one of some of the higher nit levels.
Either 600 or 1,000, I would agree.
Yes. So you can look over here on the left-hand side on the HDR side, and you can see that the cloud or the sun behind the cloud has a little bit less like detail as far as the volume of the cloud. It's a little bit brighter, a little bit more blown out. And I think this is some of what we were talking about earlier. Like these pictures I snapped because they were the clearest distinction of things that we saw. And so like the previous, you could tell they weren't very distinct, but this one now we're starting to get into more distinct stuff. This to me seemed like I just felt like to me that was a little bit more true to life when it was a little bit clipped, not a whole lot clipped. Like some of them will get here are a whole lot clipped. Here's your horse picture that you were talking about. And so Ryan, I might let you speak to this, but you'll notice that the the Dolby Vision had a lot more color detail on the horse, and this looks blown out in the picture, but it wasn't in real life. Like the right side did look a little better in real life.
Yes, I agree.
But it absolutely had more color, and the more color showing up, although on the right it actually looks more blown out than the left, which doesn't really make sense. It's not what we saw. But
The right is actually less blown out than the left. The left is very blown out. And we're actually going to talk about this in the next topic. This is part of the misguidance that cameras can provide, right? If you just looked at this picture, the opinion that you're going to have on what you see without the person telling you their experience is potentially very different.
Yeah.
Right. Because in that picture, the one on the left looks better.
Well, subjectively, yes.
But I think we all agreed that the one on the right was actually better in this, unless it was the very high or the lower nit ones. This turned a little bit green to me and a little bit dimmer to me in real life in person.
This would have been the 600 nit one.
Yeah. Okay. Next picture. Is it switching? Oh, okay. It's two shots of the same one, so it's just a slightly different shot, but looks the same. So I'm going to switch it. Skip it. Here's a Yellowstone shot. This one I pointed out, I took a picture because, again, I took these pictures because these were the pictures of all the time we took that made more difference. So you can see there's more blue on the Dolby Vision and less on the HDR. More blue in the sky.
Now, when you say more difference, we're excluding things getting blown out to the point of the horse, because that was horrific.
Mm-hmm.
But when things are closer, these are the ones where you're actually able to identify pretty easily the differences.
Yep,
yes,
something that's different.
Like you can, in this particular image, and it was true when you were seeing it in person, there was more contrast to the image on the right. You had more accurate brights, and you weren't crushing or losing the detail in the bottoms. The one on the left looks like you just took everything, like your dynamic range and audio, and just did this, and just smashed everything together. And the Dolby Vision does a bit better job of keeping that range.
Now, Ryan, are you making this larger on the screen than our faces so the audience at home can see that better? Or if you haven't, can you real quick?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. I only see the picture. I don't see our thing. So this is I think this is probably either at the last moment before it switches on a lower 1,000 nit or maybe the 10,000 nit.
No, we didn't go that far in the 10,000 nits. We didn't go all the way to the black, I think, until 1,000.
Yeah. Okay. Well, certainly you can see the clipping on the left-hand image. And it started dim, and it got brighter and brighter and brighter, and that HDR side really got blown out much faster than maybe even the Dolby Vision one didn't noticeably get blown out, but the HDR side did when you're watching it in person.
Yep, and that was indicative of many of these images with black backgrounds. The same thing happened, where as it got brighter, things got more and more blown out, and you just lost all the detail. Whereas on the Dolby Vision one, it maintained the spectral highlight brightness, but it was able to maintain the contrast throughout the entire image, and you didn't lose the detail. So to me, Dolby Vision, when you start pushing the boundaries, absolutely is worth it, like any really well done tone mapping. I guess it just depends on what you value.
Okay, here's the next one. Oh, that's a little bit of video here.
I think this is the HD version versus the disc.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's the Netflix subtitles.
Yeah, subtitles, yep.
I don't know why it's pausing so much here. I apologize. This was pretty distinctly different here in person.
Yep. I mean, the whole clip here was hugely different between the one on the left, which was Netflix streamed, and the one on the right, which was the UB9000. Now, to be clear, it was an HD stream, and it was not Dolby Vision. So this was like worst case scenario. But I think a lot of people watch content like this, like the one on the left.
Because it's easily available when you want to watch it.
Yeah, for sure.
Unless you have an at-home media library. I mean, who's going to go hunt for a disc?
What is it with like all these streaming services just randomly going to Spanish?
Yeah, Bob, what's up with them going into Spanish?
Do I need to censor anything on here? I don't think.
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think
You
so.
guys had mentioned that one of the archways had been blown out on one.
It will when you go outside and the phosphor hits. It's that one right there on the left of the screen. Or right, sorry.
You can even see all
there.
the
Did you see
pixelation
it? You can see it even in this video. Look at all the compression artifacts on the left-hand side.
It's really bad
in this sky. If I rewind it just a smidgen and we play this section again, and then we'll skip it because once you got outside and the lights started getting brighter, it was harder to tell. So let me go back. Watch on this left-hand side. I don't know what's happening right here. That's didn't look like that in person. But you see these compression artifacts?
Yep.
That was very visible in person and not attractive.
And that was really bad too. Every time the flare went off, it was awful.
I mean, it's still happening right there.
Yep. Yep. And none of that was evident on the one on the right.
So that's the 1080p stream versus the 4K Dolby Vision disc. So you would expect a difference there, but it was even more dramatic than what we're seeing.
And Classy Tech brings up a good point, and he is a professional calibrator, that he says most of his clients don't pay for the premium app versions or get it through their cable service and end up watching it in HD SDR for everything. And then he goes on to say, and at least half of them have $3,000 to $6,000 TVs. What are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
It goes back to, we've talked about this numerous times. People have a tendency to think that if I buy this new sparkly piece of hardware, it's going to fix all of my problems. But they don't fix the underlying problem. And in this case, it's the source material. And if you're watching just average, your Joe Schmo version of Netflix, which can be great because you don't need the best version of everything, like Real Housewives of Beverly Hills or whatever. Maybe my wife needs them in true 4K. I don't know.
Is it cake is better? Probably just as good.
Maybe. You don't need it. But in situations like this, you will absolutely notice. And I do not understand the idea where I'm going to go buy a really expensive TV and then I'm going to skimp out on everything that I'm going to feed it. Doesn't make sense to me. But
so this was the 4K stream HDR, 4K Dolby Vision, I think, on the left versus the Dolby Vision disc on the right. But
yeah, see, we did do it.
Okay.
And it was very close.
Much closer than the 1080p.
Look how close that is. There was some slight color variations like we talked about. This kind of highlights it, where the left one was more red and the right one was more green. Which one was more accurate? I have no idea. But you can see just as much detail in both of them. And the color difference could have maybe been a panel.
So this difference. This one we said was 4K HDR on the left, not Dolby Vision. So I
think it was streamed Dolby Vision.
What did you get this off?
I mean, I was just listening to what we were talking about in the room, and I had said on the room that this was 4K HDR on the left.
Okay.
And Dolby Vision on the right.
Well, if that's the case, then that would be the color shift that we saw in everything all night.
You're right. So this was one that we were actually able to do with HDR versus Dolby Vision.
So we'll keep an eye in that sky and see if we see any compression artifacts on the left. But I don't think my eye picked them up so much in this. Besides the color differences, I thought these were pretty similar, really.
Now this was through Vudu or Movies Everywhere, Anywhere, correct? The one on the left.
Okay. The way to do this through Vudu because it was Paramount and locked down through Movies Anywhere.
So you're not seeing. I don't know if you see my mouse, but you're not seeing any compression artifacts over there on the left. which is a far cry different from the HD stream.
And you really don't. We didn't see them either. Like when we were in person, we were looking for them, and it looked
very similar,
subjectively similar. Like if you got out and measured it, yeah, I bet you could find a measurable difference, but it looked very similar.
They looked close enough that I wouldn't go get the disc out if I had to go hunt for it.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the next one here.
This was the Fire.
This has a very different coloring, and
Yeah,
we saw that in person too.
Yep.
So same sort of thing, HDR on the left, Dolby Vision on the right.
And I think that's due to the Fire causing clipping, and it's not able to get to the color that it needs to, or Dolby Vision is doing something similar to what Mad VR does, where it'll intentionally map to a more different color without encountering clipping. So the left just looks kind of blown out in the Fire.
Yep.
Okay, next one. This is Top Gun Maverick, Dolby Vision on the right. Would this have been Dolby Vision on the left or just HDR? I don't recall.
This one I think was Dolby
Vision. Dolby Vision.
We were trying to sync it up because obviously they're not the same source. So there's a little bit of echo in the audio. If you can pick up the audio, it's because they weren't exactly frame to frame, but
we can't hear the audio.
You get the idea.
They're close enough.
And this isn't a great thing because it's just not good enough quality probably by the time it gets to the audience. But at any rate, we're telling you, like, we were looking at their skin tones, kind of like the way flesh has those different gradients and so forth. We did not see any difference left to right on this particular movie between streaming and the disc. And I didn't pick up any motion artifacts. I think
Bob did.
This is the one Bob
No,
said
not on this one. This is the one the smoke looked slightly different, but and that might have just been me making it up on the spot because our brains are horrifically inaccurate.
That's it.
No, that wasn't the smoke.
Stop share. All right, your second topic.
So classy topic. Tech Calibration says the HDR10 and Dolby Vision have separate 3D LUTs. It's an LG factory tuning difference instead of Dolby Vision and HDR10 difference. So that's a calibration difference between the different modes is the color variation. Okay, so that makes sense.
For what it's worth, we knocked the 60 saturation down to 50 on the HDR presentation for this to try to get it more even ground.
So, but he's saying the color difference, like the red and green shift, was the calibrations. So it's not like a HDR10 mapping thing. It's a mode calibration thing.
Which would explain it because that was really the only difference that we saw in most stuff then.
Yeah. Yeah. So next topic. Valerion. This is like everybody's favorite topic right now.
It's hot. I
want to preface this by saying I hope this thing's successful because I think it's good for the industry. I think it's great for competition. I'm worried that we're getting a re-embodiment of the LG A10. And we all know what a monster that thing was in the visual fidelity place. I mean, I had one and it was monstrous in the negative term. And people raved about it. I mean, Jonathan, you remember that people were all about that thing. Like it was the JVC killer.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of people that had them and they were like, this thing's amazing. And then
is that the one that shoots light out the front?
No, that's the Optima.
That's the Optima. Okay.
It's not that bad. It is not its own bias lighting. And I'm worried that we're going to encounter the same thing. Now, we watched a video that had just dropped after we did that HDR10 versus Dolby Vision comparison on this LG C3s. And it was a gentleman, I won't name names, that was doing a bunch of similar, like kind of the Chinese projectors. And there were some that weren't, that all have, it seems like all of them have handles, the lifestyle projectors. He was doing a review of probably 10 of them. And he had video content on them. and the Valerion came in first. It had what was its contrast numbers? 1500 to 1 native?
Native I think was 17. Was that what that he said? It was like
on the
1700.
forums they're saying 1500 to 2000 native, and then when you turn on EBL,
it was like 12,000.
It goes from 7,000 to 15,000 depending on who you read.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But he measured 7 if I remember right, didn't
No,
he?
I think he measured 12 on that particular
7?
one.
I thought he was 7. What was 7 then? Maybe that was dynamic. I don't remember.
Was that when he had the test pattern with 1 dot?
Oh, yes, it was. It was the 1 dot versus 2 dot test pattern.
And he got 7,000 when he was using the bigger one, which is usually what the market and the industry uses. But then Valerion said, hey, if you use this one with 2 smaller dots going in different directions, he got 12,000 to 1.
Mm-hmm.
So which one's more accurate? I'm going to assume the industry one, but I don't know because I haven't seen this thing in person. So, and then we saw another video by another group, and it had them side by side with EBL and without EBL, and they did it in post. They videoed each one by itself, and then they stitched them together. What were you guys' thoughts? Let's start on the one that they stitched together. What were you guys' thoughts on that one?
There was really something wrong with the one with the EBL on versus off.
And why do you say that?
The ISO on the side looked horrifically grainy.
Okay. Jonathan?
So in that video, that was the one that you're talking about where it was split and you could tell the whole video was split.
Mm-hmm.
I'll let you guys talk to the camera trickery that could accidentally or non-accidentally be at play there, that you guys will know that more than me. From what I could tell, if there was no camera trickery, EBL was doing something that was like pretty miraculous.
Mm-hmm.
But it's yet to be seen by me. I read on the forums a whole lot of positivity about it, and it looks like it's really doing amazing things on that video. But the way they filmed it was making Bob and Ryan have some questions about the way it was done.
And it was all dark content because it was all Batman. There was no bright content in that. Was there any bright content in that at all?
There were bullet flashes and stuff, but
one of them it had some because it had some scenes from what's the one with Will Smith? There were some bright scenes in that.
Was that in that, or was that in the NZ8 versus the Valerion one?
That might have been the video that you're talking about. NZ8.
I think that was in the Valerion one, the NZ8 versus the Valerion one, not that one. I think that was just Batman in that one, and it was just all dark content.
Mm-hmm. You're right. You're right.
The multi one had the Will Smith one.
Yes, that was
I do think because he showed it side by side with quite a few different models, and we saw that how his camera works with quite a few different models. It does, at least in the DLP world, in that lifestyle projector thing, really bring something new to the table. How it compares with the long throw stuff like JVC, Sony, Epson, that's kind of yet to be seen.
It looked like it had a weird color shift, though.
Yeah, but that's calibrate. I mean, I'm not worried about color necessarily. I'm more worried about how it deals with the darks, how it deals with the brights, what's its native contrast, what's its anti-contrast, that kind of stuff. You can fix most of the other stuff unless it's a A10 with multi-directional gradients and a bunch of other stuff.
Well, I mean, just like with the JVC issue, I mean, when you start doing all that laser dimming, is it going to stay color accurate as it dims?
Yeah.
Because they're relying heavily on laser dimming to maintain that
and gamma manipulation that they say in the threads. Again, they say
could it? Maybe I don't know. I haven't seen it in
way.
person. Mm-hmm. And yeah, in that multi one, it had the highest DE at I think in
like 15.
It was like 15-17% or something.
Yeah,
in its accurate color mode.
Yeah,
or maybe it was the out of the box one. I couldn't quite keep track of.
So the color thing that we were talking about was, and this is why I brought up the cameras with the TVs, is that if a camera is looking at two different displays and it's messing with ISO and it's messing with the white point, it's going to favor one of the displays. Which one it favors? It's typically going to be the brighter one, because it's going to bring the other one up to that brightness level, because the camera wants to make the entire image have a uniform gray point, and usually what it's looking for is like an 18% gray. So it's trying to make the entire image have an 18% gray. So if you made the image black and white and you took a sample in the middle or wherever and you gave it an average, like what is this thing's average gray? It'd be 18%. That's usually what it does. So when you do that, what Bob is talking about in this particular video, the part that didn't have, and this is kind of where it doesn't really go with what I just said, the part that didn't have EBL had all of this noise. And usually the noise that you see is part of, when I typically see that, it's ISO on a camera, and you raise that and it brightens the image and you see all of this noise. Why it was in that particular part and the EBL one didn't have it was
because
really
because on the
strange.
EBL one, to generate that contrast, they're having to raise darker parts lighter.
I guess you're right.
So the image is going to be overall. The image is going to be brighter with EBL on, and that's why it's the ISO is going to be lower.
You're right. So
when the other one's going to be darker overall, so it has to. That's why you got all that grain on that.
So in my example, I was saying that you're going to have them both on the screen at the same time. When in this example, because they were done in post, they looked at each one individually, and the other one, since it was darker overall, it brought everything up, and it you had all of that noise. This is just opinion. I haven't seen it. I haven't done these tests. This is just a guesstimate of what we saw. So take this with a grain of salt. This is very, very, very subjective. I know I harp on people for being subjective, but we don't have them. I don't have a Valerion that I could say, oh, this is exactly what it did. Here's the measurements. We're just looking at other people's reviews, because I've looked at all those reviews when I did the LG thing, and then I bought an LG, and this is not what I thought I was getting. And it definitely was not. So then Classy Tech mentioned that there was a video. Have you guys watched it with the NZ8 versus the Valerion?
Yes.
And it was done by the same guy that did the 10 of the projector reviews. And I'm not disqualified. I mean, he does measurements. He's got a Jetty. He's got a color meter and stuff. I just think with the cameras and stuff, you gotta, and I think he means well. I'm not trying to discredit him. It's just when you see something on a camera, you cannot take that as gospel, because it is going to be different. Very different. So don't buy based on what you see a display look like through a camera in a review. Right. Don't.
And
in
that one, I thought the Valerion looked washed out in a lot of places. In some of those like Will Smith faces and some of those things outside. Mm-hmm. But again, I don't know if that's how it actually looked, or if that's just how that particular picture of a picture compressed and put on YouTube looked, watching it on my phone. So,
Jonathan, can you talk about, or I can talk about, why that's dangerous? Like if you have the NZ8, and let's take the camera out of the equation. Like if you have an NZ8 or a projector with a really, really good black floor, and you put another projector right next to it, what can happen?
Yeah. The JVC could end up looking quite dim, when in reality, if it's by itself, you would be able to see some of the detail that wouldn't show up on the camera if they're side by side. Is that what you're trying to point out?
Well, that and the native contrast gets smacked.
Yes. I don't necessarily agree with the people who say you can't compare them in the same room side by side, because even when we've done that many times, you can still see it.
You could see the difference in room side by side.
The camera, in that kind of instance, if one's significantly brighter, if they're raising the basis of the whole image up, it could, like some of that stuff in the NZ8 look dimmer than it would look in real life. Like that's just how it is. And maybe it wasn't portraying the JVC as fairly as it could. In my opinion, that JVC versus NZ8 really did show that Valerion can kind of stand, though. Like it's not a piece of junk, because I mean, we've seen like JVC versus pieces of junk in videos before, and the pieces of junk look like pieces of junk.
Well, so but subjectively in contrast, though, I mean, when we did the very first projector shoot out at Ryan's house, if we tone mapped everything through Mad VR, if you picked content that wasn't extreme ends of the spectrum, I mean, how much do things look different?
Well, so like if we put that for the Epson 3800 or the Optima or something like
With
that.
that Optima was in there. That Optima looked great in certain content that wasn't testing the limits of the technology.
Not on anything dark.
But not anything dark. I agree. But
And-
in like mid-tier, like kind of outdoors, grassy
Mhm.
stuff, like walking around type content where there's not a lot of brights and everything was tone mapped, they all looked pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is like, let's say the Epson 3800 from that January 2021 shootout we did. If you put that up against the NZ8 and you took a video of it, that Epson and anything black like that would look like a gray, muddy mess.
Yep.
completely on camera.
Mhm.
On camera. The JVC might look dim, but it certainly wouldn't be anywhere close to black on that Epson, the 3800, or the Optima for that matter, the DLP, the cheap DLP. So I'm contrasting that kind of experience with what we saw with the Valerion versus JVC, where the Valerian, it didn't look as black as the JVC, but it didn't look like a gray, muddy mess either.
No, but it's difficult to say because we haven't seen them in person.
Mhm.
And I think when you start putting another light source in, especially in dark scenes, you're potentially muddying what the JVC can do because it needs more light control to be able to get to those darker levels. Otherwise, you're impacting it, you're affecting it from light pollution, right? You're bringing up its black floor.
But were
and it's
you
losing
even seeing
contrast.
muddiness on the JVC? Because I think that's making like a false pretense. Like whether the video of the JVC didn't look muddy.
No.
But what I'm saying is how do you know it couldn't have looked better if you just filmed it by itself?
I think we all know it looks better because we've seen them.
But I'm saying even on
But
camera,
it looked dim in the side by side comparison.
It looked dim because
it did look dim, absolutely. Potential, but that's probably because of what the camera was doing.
But not muddy.
I'm not saying that it will ever look muddy. I'm saying that you're potentially weakening its native contrast because you're bringing up its black floor because it's being impacted by another projector's light.
Sure.
It's like if you have white walls and the light's reflecting back in, you're ruining your contrast.
Sure.
So by doing that, you're weakening the one with a better black floor, is what I'm saying there. The things that we couldn't see in that video is they're small images. It's on a camera. So at the end of the day, what I'm trying to tell people is don't make decisions based on a video of a video display because you don't know what that thing actually looks like in person. Like the LG 810 videos, if I remember right, you could never see laser speckle, but you got that thing in the room and the laser speckle was awful. Mm-hmm. So the other thing to keep in mind, and this is the same with audio, because people like see him chat like the JVC is outrageously overpriced. And yeah, maybe it's too expensive. I don't know. But when you start chasing those percentage points, things get really expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Really expensive. So you're chasing those diminishing returns. The price does not go down. It goes up. So your returns go like this and your price goes like this.
And you have to use it in the right environment to highlight the things that you're paying for. If you're going to take that JVC NZ8 and you're going to put it in your living room and watch, a movie on it on the wall or on a pull down screen, you wasted money because the room is never going to support any of the features that you're buying that projector for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You've just got you've got to have the right equipment for the right environment, and if it's got to match it.
I did offer somebody to have them come out here and we can see one in person.
What'd he say?
He said he'd have to talk to his wife.
That's like a friend saying maybe. And that means no.
That means no. Yes. But I did ask. So I'm not trying to run away from this. I want to see it.
Sure.
Yeah. I want this thing to be successful. We talked about this on...
And I don't know if you want to bring his name into the equation, but if he wants to do it, we have quite a few different projectors in Kansas City. We could.
I mentioned that.
I mentioned that. Could be another little shootout, the 2024 shootout.
Yeah, I don't want to mention him because I don't want to throw him under. Not that I would try to, but
and it's worth right. I mean, I almost would like to mention him, but because he's had a lot of experience in here. He owned an NZ7, RS2100. We don't have to mention his name until we decide.
I'd rather not.
You mentioned enough, you're going to figure it out.
He owned an RS2100. He owned an Epson LS1200. He owns the BenQ W5800. So he's got some top-end player projectors, and the Valerion's his favorite for what it's worth.
Yeah, but he hasn't had any of those in an A/B comparison, and we know how bad the human memory can be.
That's all fair.
My main worry about this projector is the response that it's getting on AVS just smells weird, right? Everyone is positive about it. And I posed this on my last video that I made, not a live stream, but I posed this on my last video is, why are they telling us this? Why is everybody telling us how good this thing is? And why are so many people getting this projector and then writing about it on AVS?
I can't open Facebook without seeing a Valerion ad.
I know.
As my second ad on my feed.
So
first ad on my feed.
I'm constantly asking myself, why are they telling me this? And I haven't been able to come up with an answer because there is no answer. And it just has me worried that it's going to be another LG, because this is exactly what happened with the LG.
I don't even think the LG was this hyped.
No, but it was pretty heavily hyped.
Yes, it was.
And this one is way more hyped.
I mean, realistically, I want this to be amazing because it's going to put pressure on the rest of the projector industry to increase. And this is an industry that's really falling the wayside.
It's kind
because
of
these things are going to, I mean, with this, as good as displays are and as big as displays are, the industry needs to start pushing lumens. I mean, when we're at the point where I can go get a 83-inch 97 inch is really expensive, but even a 97-inch like OLED, why do I want a 120-inch screen? I need to start pushing 150-inch screens, 160-inch screens. There's a massive impact there, and TVs aren't going to hit that point, but you need a lot of light to light that.
So Grave Danger says it's only $2,000. And if I remember right, the LG was not $5,000. It was like $3,000.
Yeah, it was closer to $3,000, maybe in 2,800 or something, wasn't it?
It was
2,400, something like that.
High twos, if I remember right. So it was not $5,000. It was marked as like a JVC killer for everything that it was bringing to the table. It had all of these numbers and specs, and it's already come to light that some of the specs that were shown on the website were not true, and they've gone back and changed stuff. So I'm skeptical, and I'm worried for the community, for people that are going down this pathway. But hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully I am wrong. Should we answer some questions? You guys got anything else to talk about with that one?
Yeah, I think it might be worth mentioning this. So Classy said it's got a bad reputation with it being an AWL partner sister company, if not the same company. I'm not 100% sure I agree with that. I don't have a huge repertoire of information on it, but I do know that I've been reading on the forums that AWL still manages to do firmware updates for their older models. In fact, they were just talking about like one of the 4-year-old models got a new firmware update recently. So it's not like AWL is a big overseas company. They're big in the lifestyle projectors. They're not a big name in America yet, but they're a big company. And so that's almost like a good thing. In fact, big enough that a lot of the people that kind of in my text chat saying like, why are they doing a Kickstarter? Like, it seems strange that a big company would be doing a Kickstarter.
So Classy clarified himself. He says, I'm referring to their performance and business actions of suing those that are negative to them and not overpraising them.
And that's not an uncommon thing that's been happening.
Look out, Ryan. Look out.
Whatever. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying I'm skeptical.
We're all.
It's not just limited to speaker companies. There were a lot of other companies that were doing.
So
the same
sue
kind
me.
Ryan's like, come at me, bro.
Bring it. I'm not afraid of it, but I'm just skeptical. I want to see it, and then I want to I'm not going to write like scathing things about it. I just want people to be objective and wait to see it. Because measurements are not everything. Like, yeah, they're a big part of it, but there are things that like speckle, like gradients, there's things that you're not going to get from a native contrast number, unfortunately, that I think we need to take a look at. And buying something based on a camera and saying, oh, this is so close to a JVC, why would I spend this amount of money? I have a feeling that that's some camera stuff going on, because if we talk about the ABL dynamic contrast measurements and stuff being 12,000 to 1, I mean, what is a JVC's dynamic contrast with its laser dimming engaged? It's like absurdly high, like high 5 digits, if not 6-digit territory, isn't it?
I mean, wasn't starting with the 50-40. Epson was saying 1,000,000 to 1 dynamic contrast.
I'm
or
not
something.
talking about
Like,
that.
just, I mean, as far as like a spec on a sheet, I mean, it didn't mean anything, but it was the number that was there.
I'm talking about more of the like
as far as a measured
stuff.
result,
yeah. So, Gravedanger says, Ryan, just buy it. It's only $2,000. Come on, how much do you have invested in your theater? So I actually thought about it, but then I went and read the return policy. You can't really return them.
Not off Kickstarter.
If they're open. No, this was just off their website.
Oh.
Like their website's return. Go read it. I mean, it's not really instilling confidence in me wanting to buy something. It's like, you can't return it. You're going to get hit with like a 20% restocking fee or worse, or you're not even going to be able to return it. So I'm like, that's confidence in your product. If you're worried I'm going to give it back to you. But who knows? Hopefully I'm just skeptical. Anyway, time for questions?
Sure.
Classy, email me. web@hometheatersavants.com. I'm always open for more information. Let's jump into these questions. So Jonathan asks.
I ask? Not me.
Yes, not you. I asked Ryan already, but to Jonathan and Bob, any difference between Odyssey Multi-X PC software via mini DSP for subcalibration or verse mini DSP for subcalibration? I have 2 JTR RS2s.
I still haven't messed with multi EQX. Have you messed with it, Ryan, now at this point? Or
No.
Bob?
I have not used the PC version, and I don't have a mini DSP, but I'm planning on buying one soon to do some experimentation with some things.
I have one you can borrow.
Okay.
I have to find it.
Is it the newer version? Is it? Well, I'll talk to you later.
Okay.
I have the $20 app that I've played with, but it's not the same as the multi EQ that you're talking about. And I do have a mini DSP, and there's a lot of things you can do with mini DSP. And from what I read, multi EQX is pretty similar. I don't have a good answer for that. I just don't have the experience to say.
I don't have enough information to be able to provide a good answer, unfortunately. Maybe we should buy the app and see what happens. I don't have a platform to be able to do it. Jonathan has 2 platforms now to be able to do it.
It's true.
That's 6800 and the AV10. If you guys can just start questions as they come in, I'm going to stay in the question area. So sorry, Jonathan, we don't have the confidence in experience with the multi EQX PC software to be able to give you a good answer, and I don't want to talk to something I don't know. So White Glove Review says, hey, Jonathan, you were right. NX6000D shipped yesterday. Is there anything I need to do to break in the Ultimax 2s before putting them in their enclosure?
Yeah, I mentioned what to do in chat, but I'll repeat it on the air. He should do a open air excursion test. You don't have to drive it to the max output, but you should get those drivers moving pretty good just to make sure you don't have any coil rub and make sure you don't need to return them. After you've done that, put it in the box. If the box is properly sized, let them have it. On your NX6000D, I would limit your output to about 1750 watts per channel with the there's a limiter in there. Set it to 4 ohms, and then change the limiter down to about that 1750 watts. That'll keep your NX6000D from power cycling. If you overload the amp, it'll try to pull too much power and it'll just reset itself. It takes a few seconds. It's not good in a movie to have your base just cut out completely at a high output. So just limit it and you won't have that problem. Other than that, let them have it, man. Go for broke. You're not going to hurt anything. There's no break-in period you have to worry about with that kind of stuff.
PK Hamu 2005. Is Dolby Vision implementation better on an OLED or an LED panel? DV usually makes pick darker than HDR10, so a brighter LED panel make it any different? I think this is what we talked about with Dolby Vision just being not as bright. And I think that is due to it maintaining the contrast and pushing and getting the detail, having and maintaining the spectral highlight brightness without increasing the brightness for the entire frame and blowing things out. So this is part of the issue with high performance tone mapping, or better than what people are potentially used to, is they mistake a higher contrast scene for being dimmer and they gravitate towards the brighter one, even though it's blowing out and losing content or detail. So I think that's what's happening, PK, is that you're potentially misconstruing the brighter scene and loss of detail and liking it. Not that there's anything wrong with that, versus the Dolby Vision one, which is darker, but is actually maintaining the contrast of the scene and you're seeing more detail and maintaining the brightness through the spectral highlights. So normally you'd have to bring down the brightness of the spectral highlights or overall in order to get the same level of detail that Dolby Vision is giving you versus HDR10. Anything to add? Okay. Suspect. Question. Tactile base, smaller sub 12 or 15? Almost hitting X max, violent shaking. Oh, he's saying, should I get a 12 or a 15? Almost hitting X max, violently shaking, or 21 or 24 sub, lots of power and headroom, hardly moving, having to walk up and touch it? What is more impactful?
I have an opinion on this, but it doesn't have to be the only one. Do you guys have an opinion?
Yes. I want to hear Jonathan's.
So mine is going to be just in the relative nature of very near field. So you guys know that I have near field subs behind my chairs, directly behind the chairs. And I've talked to and even experienced myself with smaller sizes. If you can get those drivers very close, the more the drivers are moving, the physical cone is moving, you're going to feel that more than if it's just loafing. And I'll give you a very specific example. One of the guys that came over to my house for M-Wave was telling me a story that he had 15s behind a seat as near fields, and he thought he wanted to go to 24s. So he upgraded to 24s, and when he put the 24s in there, he had very little feel, because by the time he got them up to the volume that was comfortable, the drivers were just barely moving. So there wasn't, and by the 15s, to this exact point, the 15s were really jumping. The driver cone is really jumping, and that there's like a particle velocity basically that's happening. If there's a thread on AVS forum that talks about this a lot, and there's guys that have kind of tried to figure it out. Effectively, if the driver's very close and you're looking at for the feel, like you're implementing it for the feel, then you want that extra cone movement. If it's across the room, I'm not sure that you're going to be like gaining that much by having it move a lot. And you're probably better to have the headroom of the larger sub. That'd be my take. What do you think, Ryan?
I want to hear if Bob has anything. Bob, you got anything?
I mean, I have not had I guess I've had it for almost a year now. I have a near field sub that might look remarkably identical to a near field sub that Ryan used to have.
It got rehomed.
Could be related.
I have I only have two subwoofers at the moment. Will change sometime soon.
Dramatically, I hear through the grapevine.
Yes. Maybe dramatically.
No, there's no maybe.
Yeah, it's going to happen. So I mean, right now I have two subwoofers that they're Paradigm subs. They've got each one has 6 8-inch drivers, and so while I can technically be flat down to 13 hertz, there's the question of what dB that's at. And no, I can't hit 105. I can't hit 100. I don't think I can even hit 100. I get a lot of room gain. I've got like 17 dB of room gain because of the length of my room down low, but it cuts off at 13 hertz. You can feel an impact from that a little bit, but having an 18 behind the couch and shaking the couch is a much more impactful experience. You can tell when it's on, But if you turn it up too much, I don't like that sensation. Having experienced not near field dynamic impact at Ryan's multiple times, there's no subs that are touching the couch or within, a couple feet of it, but that couch still shakes from subs across the room.
Yeah, but technically the 50 is a near field.
Well, but it wasn't on, earlier this week, and the couch was still shaking.
Well, yes. Yeah.
On one processor versus the other one because of the way it was doing stuff.
Yes, I would agree.
So on the one, the couch was still shaking quite well with just the 21s and the 32s. Now the 50 is a different animal.
Yeah, I agree. So tactile base, I agree with Jonathan. It depends on where the subwoofer is going to be and what its use case is going to be. If it's not a near field, I'm going to say the larger the driver, quality driver, the better it's going to be. It also can depend, though, on what you're trying to get, because a lot of those 21-inch drivers are not going to have the low-end potential output that a lot of the 18s do. They're more pro audio drivers, and you're going to get frequency responses as such. I mean, the kick subs in the Experience Center are very much like that. They don't have the output of some of the 18s that are on the market. They don't have the level of excursion, but the trade-off there is, they have ridiculous amounts of output in the mid-bass regions. So it really is going to come down to what you're trying to get. I don't think there's any replacement for displacement. You're going to get, I think, a better overall experience if implemented correctly with the larger subs, and then potentially using, if you want to go the near field route, 15s or maybe even 18s or even 12s if you can get them close enough for near fields. I think it's just going to be a better overall experience, and you're going to have a lot more output from the bigger drivers and displacement, as long as it's not everything else being equal, in my opinion. Anything else on that one?
No, there's a second piece to this question when we start it. So the same gentleman suspect. Just highlight that one so you get the full thing, and see if there's anything else to add.
This one?
Yeah.
Violent shaking, high pressure, air moving, or more surface area and more volume of air.
I think we addressed it basically.
I think you can potentially get both of those out of the bigger drivers as long as they're placed further away. I mean, the 21s, you got chest pressurization in my room for sure. And they're the smallest driver in there for subs is 21s, and then it's 32s and the 50. So just depends on placement, like Jonathan said. I'd agree. Good question, though. Meditili, I have a quality power strip. Do you guys use any of the power conditioners in your system? And if so, any recommendations for under $600? Was Jonathan already searching for something?
No.
But you have one.
Mine's not really under 600 unless you find it on sale, which I did. Mine was actually I purchased under 600, but normal price is not. I have the Furman. It's a Panamax 5400, like PM 5400, I think is the model on it. It's a good power strip. It's got voltage regulation. It's got triggers and all that sort of thing. I think if you're going to do a power strip, you probably ought to either do an active UPS, like something like a APC smart UPS, or you should get something with voltage regulation. Else, I'm not sure that it's really worth your time to do. A whole home
power amps.
A whole home.
Would you put amps and stuff on a UPS? I wouldn't.
No, you're not.
I wouldn't put them on anything with voltage regulation either. It doesn't sound good. It robs the headroom. You're
supposed to just put your processor on there and your disc player and just your smaller electronics. Your projector, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you can do the sequential mode stuff that doesn't rob transients as high, but it's not going to have as much protection. But protection's a relative standpoint from someone speaking from experience here. it will protect your goal of a whole home power conditioner or whole home surge protector, and I highly recommend them. Is not to save your electronics. A whole home surge protector is to save your house. Because I had a near field ground strike 3 years ago, and it melted my GFIs outside. It melted the one in the garage. Basically, everything that was plugged in got fried. But those things dumped enough current to ground that my house didn't catch on fire. I didn't have wiring burn in the walls. All my interior stuff was fine. So certain things that were plugged in worked. Or threw away every power supply I have. But even things that were plugged in and that were plugged into good conditioners had another path to a surge. So while you think you're getting this covered, I had most of my electronics, or a lot of my electronics, got fried because it got into Google Fiber, and Google Fiber still runs one metallic ground line. So it got in there, got in my network, and killed everything that was hooked up with Ethernet or fried Ethernet boards. And then because it was in there, it got into HDMI, and anything that was on HDMI got fried. So just because you think you're plugging your equipment into a really expensive power conditioner, it's going to save it. It's really not going to. From a lightning standpoint, it's damage mitigation at that point in time. It's still
lightning. You're not stopping it.
No, but if you're in an area with frequent brownouts,
sure,
or you have bad power next to you, you can correct some of that stuff. There's some of the whole home surge protectors do line noise mitigation also.
Well, Jonathan, you actually have experience with this with yours.
With the
removing line noise and hum.
Yeah, I mean, kind of unrelated, but what I found is just grounding the chassis all together on the amplifiers and the processor, and then ground it to your green ground plug on the electrical outlet. If you have multiple outlets, just ground them all together like a big daisy chain. It'll eliminate noise. I have so much noise in here without doing that it's so obnoxious. You put that ground wire in place and all the noise is gone.
Common ground, baby.
So a lot of your processors or your AVRs will have like a ground screw on the back. Sometimes it'll be called a phono plug, but a ground screw. And the amplifiers do or don't, depending on what you buy. If they don't, just unscrew one of the chassis screws, like one of the case cover screws, scratch off the metal with a screwdriver so it's just bare metal, wrap a little wire around it, pigtail it to your other wires, and then screw the screw back in, and that works as the ground on that kind of equipment. That's how I've done some of my iNuke amps, for instance, and all the noise is gone, like completely gone. Not just a little gone. So that works well.
Cool. Good question, Mitty. White Glove Review says we should do Spotify versus Apple versus Tidal versus Disc.
I don't think there's be a difference once you get match bit rates and get above 320.
The volume levels are recorded differently. We noticed between Tidal and some of the other services, but if you kind of normalize the volume or figure out how to kind of get that in the right ballpark, it's going to be pretty hard to tell the difference, I think.
The big volume difference is going to be in Atmos.
Now,
and that's just the way they're running it.
There could be a measurable difference, but I don't think there's going to be a subjective difference.
And if there's any difference there, it's most likely to be the fact that they were taken from different original masters.
Yeah, that's part of the one of the variables you can't get over. Like, we have no idea, potentially, unless you're on Tidal or something, what the mastering was in Disc. Like on Apple and Spotify, I have no idea. I don't know what the mastering is. So
one thing to note for your audience, and I have a little short on this, but your Apple TV by default does not use lossless, and you can switch it to lossless under the Music app. If you go into settings, you go to the Music app, you open it up, it's by default Apple audio codec. I don't remember 320 or something like that. I can't remember the exact bit rate, but it's lossless, and it's lossy. You can switch it to lossless with just a toggle. So if you have an Apple 4K TV, make sure and do that.
Good question or good suggestion. Nicholas Benfredge says, how would 4 RTJ18 subs compare to 2 JTR RS2s?
It's going to depend on where you have them put. Because if you stack 2 RTJs on top of each other, then you have 2 RS2s.
I would say don't go chasing this, because you're talking 4 single 18s versus 2 double 18s. You still got 4 drivers, and the drivers are going to be remarkably similar.
Mm-hmm.
Remarkably similar, and I say that with a little wink. You might look into that a little bit. I don't think that's the right chase for you. You should look to do something different if you're going to try to upgrade your subs.
But But if you put the subs in different locations, you're going to have more flexibility with 4 versus 2.
Exactly.
Sure.
You'll fix
More
more. You can
uniformity
potentially
between
fix more
those.
room modes. Yeah.
Yeah. But the RTJs are really designed. Their main benefit is that they're a little bit smaller, and they are they're passive, right? You need external amplification, which they do provide. It would go in the rack or in a different location, so you don't have to have power in that location. So that is a benefit.
And the amp that they come with has DSP for those subs built into them, doesn't it?
Yes. Same as the JTRs.
Yeah.
Yeah. The JTRs are just going to have plate amps. Nicholas then asks, Jonathan, what chairs do you have?
So these are actually purchased from Alibaba, an app, and they're Chinese chairs. They're made by a company which is eluding me right this second for some reason. Let me look it up real quick. They're a big provider. They actually are behind the label on a lot of chairs that come into like Nebraska Furniture Mart.
Jonathan did a lot of research on these chairs. He talked about them for a long time, and then we were all worried he was going to get ripped off.
And I was worried for that matter. Why am I not thinking of the brand name of these chairs? What's wrong with my brain tonight?
I can't think of it either.
Archaea low back chairs. I'll find it. Low back chairs.
Googling himself.
I am. Model. Here it is. Manwah. I don't know why that had left my brain, but it had Manwah. MANWAH. And again, they're a giant. Like in China, they're the back end for a whole lot of companies that in America or whatnot. Like they just make a lot of the chairs. And so I found out, actually, I liked a model at Nebraska Furniture Mart that looked exactly like these. They only came in white leather. I didn't want white leather. I asked Nebraska Furniture Mart if there was any way to get anything else. They said, no, we only get this one color. I looked at the label. I tracked it back to Manwah Corporate in China. I contacted them through the Alibaba app. I said, can I get these in black leather? They said, sure. Long story short, I ordered them directly through the Alibaba app. I saved money buying off Nebraska Furniture Mart, and I got the color I wanted. They shipped direct to my house. All the duties and stuff were included, and I got them cheaper than Nebraska Furniture Mart would do. So that's an option. The world has changed. The modern world has changed. You can do stuff like that. There's a thread. I just looked it up again. I'll put the thread in there if you want specific models and contacts and that kind of stuff. If you're interested in looking, you don't even have to buy these chairs. There's a lot of options out there. Alibaba is awash with home theater stuff you can buy. I'll put that in chat.
Good question. Bruce Barnes says, drops $14 Canadian. Thank you very much for the super chat, Bruce. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Bruce.
Always appreciated, never expected. Coffee Money for bugging Jonathan all the time. Do you guys have any experience with the Dayton Audio version of the Mini DSP that's half the price and twice the channels?
Not yet for me. I haven't even read anything on it yet, so I don't have any other
capabilities
either.
But no experience with it.
Have you? I'm looking it up. Let's see if I can even find it. You guys can go on.
DSP 4008 or 408.
That I don't know.
Bruce, what's the model on that?
That's the only one they have on their site.
Digital signal processing. I'm on their site. Yeah, I see the same one now. You're a little quicker. DSP 408. As a general rule, I like Dayton Audio stuff. They've been proven out over many years to make pretty good quality things. So, at its face value, it's probably okay. As far as usability compared to Mini DSP and something, I have no idea. I haven't used it or haven't read a single review on it yet.
Be a good one to try.
Crossovers. It's got a couple different types. The advantage to what the Mini DSP is that you can get direct on it. I don't think it looks like you can get direct for that if you wanted to go that route. Yeah, not sure.
A good place to go for that, Bruce, would be AVS forums and just like search for a thread or create a thread and get some feedback. There's, you know, so many users there. Someone's bound to have some experience with exactly your question on that.
Good question. Sorry, we don't have any more information on that.
Mhm.
So Daniel's chiming in on the conversation that we had earlier about the subs. He says, "Hey guys, chiming back in on a previous inquiry I had. Actually, this is something different. Decided to go with my gut and upgrade my 3-rail 1510s to just 2 PSA EV 1813Ms. All I can say is wow." And that's what I would expect, wouldn't you?
I think I remember him commenting on one of our previous shows. Yeah, I mean, that's cool. You went
I don't know
to
what
kind of
drivers
that
that-
top class, so enjoy it, you know. Welcome.
The
A
1813.
lot bigger sub, a lot more power, a lot more surface area, just
Yeah.
a lot more.
They had 18-inch BNC driver. Yep, that's a nice driver.
On that previous topic, Ryan, before you do this one, come back to that one. This gentleman, Daniel, said he's used that Tate Audio one. I guess. Wait a minute. Did we lose it? Here it is. This is the one I'm trying to show.
Oh, sorry.
Oops, sorry. I've used it for years. I also have many DSP. Problem with the Dayton is nothing under 20 hertz. So if you're doing sealed subs, that might be kind of a bummer. If you're trying to do tactile transducers, that might be kind of a bummer. But you know, if you're doing ported subs, it may not even matter.
Under 20 hertz is hard. It takes a lot of processing power, and that's why there's a limitation in hardware and some audio EQs getting down that low. So, not surprising. Patrick Navin says, "Ryan, would you let Jonathan's friend do a true target by Magic Beans calibration in the Maviar Experience Center to compare it to the one done by Adam Peltz and Matt Trinkline?" Sure. I don't have a problem with that. I'm all about the data. I'd want, is that Chana?
Shauna, I think, is the one that's behind it, but the guy that does it here is Kevin.
Yeah, but I'd even be open to Chana coming out and doing that. I want to know, man. If it's something that's awesome, I want to know. My thing is just I've never experienced it, and I just haven't experienced it. I don't think I've ever talked necessarily ill about it. It's just yeah, I'll just leave it at that. So I'm open to it for sure. I'm always open to stuff like that.
I bet Kevin would like to explore that if Chana won't, because he enjoys showing that off, and it's pretty cool software.
May have to limit the room though, because that may take a while with all of the speakers and subs, and sometimes it gets a little complicating for solutions like that.
I say it's Joe and Tell.
Joe and Tell. Okay, thanks, Patrick. Yeah, I'm open to that. So if Joe and Tell, if you hear about this, I am fully open to that. Make that happen to have that calibration done. I won't say that I will publicize a comparison, but I will say that we can talk about the results of that in the room. Yeah, totally open for that. Daniel P., I think this is going back to the comment about his PSAs. I expected a jump in performance, but I thought losing my third near field would leave me wanting more. But so far, it has made up for all three of the rails and then some. Yeah, that would be to be expected. What do you guys think?
Yeah, very good.
Yeah. Charlie B., amplifier recommendations for sealed stereo integrity HT18 drivers in 4 cubic foot boxes.
I have my old fallback. What do you guys got?
You're going to go iNuke?
I'm going to go NX6000D, especially at that $450 price they got. And we're coming up on a holiday, and I guarantee you can get 15% off on the holiday if you just call them. So Musician's Friend has them for $450. You call in and say the coupon won't apply, but I'd like to use the coupon. The customer service agent you talk to in person on the holiday day, they'll answer the phone in person. We'll say, sure, I'll rack that up for you. So now you're paying $385 or so for a iNuke DSP.
Almost like Jonathan's done this before.
That's exactly how I ordered mine.
If you are a Musician's Friend, if you join their buyers club, I have bought my wife a lot of music related equipment through Musician's Friend. They will give you there are the possibility for additional discounts, sometimes over the phone if they're available to them, and they do have like members exclusive discounts that come out fairly regularly. So they are a good place to purchase equipment from.
I'm not a member, so I don't know if there'd be a better discount or not. That might be worth checking out. You could even ask the sales rep. But I just
The
called
really
in
cool
and
thing
they-
about Musician's Friend is if you're in Kansas City, ground shipping is usually the next day because the warehouse is in town.
and those things are supposed to be shipping in November now. And I saw in the comments one guy said, well, it might have been the one that we favorited in here. We'll come up to, but he got his. So they're shipping out now. So you're not even at a long wait. It's a great time to buy that amp, and it's a good amp for those kind of subs.
I just don't like how loud they are. Aren't they loud amps? The fans?
No, they're not that loud. I mean, they're not silent, but they're not loud. Mine never ramp up.
I guess that's true.
NX
You're only going to get half
6000B.
the power, correct?
You get about 60% of the power rating, maybe 66, depending on if you're running one channel or two. So they're rated at 3,000 watts per side. The reality is, like I said earlier, you get about you can put them at 1,700 or 1,750, or they'll power cycle. Like if you don't have that and you run them to clip lights, they'll power cycle. But if you limit them in the DSP to 1,700 watts, 1,750 watts, so instead of 3,000, 1,700, 1,750 per channel, they won't power cycle, and they'll run all day like that.
Which is
And they
just
won't
3
ramp
dB
up.
anyway.
Yeah. And it doesn't even matter. So yes, they underperform what they're rated. Find me another amp that gives 1,750 power, 715 watts per side, two sides, at 4 ohm for $385. There's nothing even close. And they actually do pretty well under 20 hertz, according to multiple people testing. Not NYT, Luke on the Man, Amir at ASR. Like they're a good amp, and they're cheap. And they were not that long ago $750. They reduced the price. I guess COVID knocked them up to $750, and somehow, in a miraculous turn of events, they brought the price back down when their price went back down. So applause to Behringer for that.
Yep.
I mean, 450 is what they were before COVID. They jumped to 750, and I lamented because I thought there's no cheap amps anymore anywhere. And then Behringer stepped up. So, yeah,
I
I
heard
highly
your call.
recommend
Jonathan with the amp light. Bring me cheap amps. They heard your call. Last question of the night. Kavian Muragatas says, hey, building my theater right now, and I'm getting the LS12000, but I keep seeing the NZ800 and the Sony 6100. But if I have to shell out the money for the projector, I won't spend on speakers as much. What would you guys do? Jonathan, I already know what you would do.
6100. I haven't seen that. Have you seen one yet?
I've seen the new one, the big one.
Did they change much between the last gen and this gen?
It is different. It's got 4K 120 now. They got rid of like the funny wonkiness that can happen on edges. That's fixed. It's a good projector.
Is it like 15,000? Is it in line with the NZ800?
I think it's around there. Yeah. Yeah. It has, so it's got the best latency of all of them. Like it's single digits, if I remember right. It's really fast. So if you're gaming, the Sony's the way to go, for sure.
The last one I saw was the one that had the pre-production sample of the last generation one.
Yeah, but that's not really fair.
That's why I can't make any comments on the current Sonys because I haven't seen one.
Right here. Valerion.
But the
cough.
I mean, realistically, if you're just building out your theater right now, my biggest thing from like having done it in the past would be, are there other people's you can go see? Are there other rooms you can experience? If so, do that before you spend a lot of money on yours, because you will probably want to make changes. And what you think you wanted might not necessarily be what you wanted when you get done. And the people you go look at might be horrific influences on you and make you want to go in a completely different direction.
I feel like I'm being called out here.
I don't. What? No, never.
Could be.
But I mean, projectors change and they change very quickly. As far as like the latest bleeding edge features on them, and you pay a lot to get to that next tier. I started off on a 5040 and I thought it was great. And I was really happy with it. I moved to an NZ8. It's an amazing projector. I love it. But it's got its limitations too. I've got it on a mid gain, so on a 1.3 gain, non-acoustically transparent screen. At 120 inches, I think it's perfect. I'd be questionable going to 135. I don't think I'd be happy on AT because I'd be losing some of that brightness that I've unfortunately gotten used to now. So paying all that money to get incremental upgrades, especially at the expense of your audio side, I don't know if I do, because the audio side is going to stick around. Most likely you're not going to end up changing your speakers frequently, but projectors, that might happen a lot more often. It depends on what you're going to buy in the speakers, but pulling $10K out of your budget or more to upgrade the projector at an early stage, unless you're already picking top tier speakers, I don't know if I would do that.
What about the middle ground of the QB1000?
The QB1000 looked great when we saw it, but it did not look, again, at the prices that they're at right now, I don't think it was a reasonable reason. I don't think there was a good reason to upgrade to it over the LS12000, unless you want the additional motion. They're really close.
Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of decided I'm not going to be spending $10,000 or $15,000 for a projector anymore. Like, that's just my own personal decision. So I'm more in like the 5,000 or less ballpark. LS12000 is probably a great choice in that area. I personally wouldn't spend the extra on the NZ100 because I think you're so far into the realm of diminishing returns at that point, but teach their own. I mean, you already knew what I was going to say there, but
if you're in a fully blacked out bat cave, I mean, like my room was not when I started, but it is now. And you painted everything black and you got a new black couch and you have dark carpet and you only put black blankets on your couch and
put electrical tape on your teeth. And
I have electrical tape over every blue LED on my things that are sitting on the floor because it bugs me really bad. But if you're going to go through that extreme, there are noticeable improvements that you're going to get out of, JVC with the really high contrast.
I don't even think you have to do that to have a noticeable difference in native contrast.
No,
like
but
the NZ800 is technically, no question, a better projector.
But if you're going to take it, you're going to throw it in a living room with white walls and a white ceiling, and you're really going to hamstring yourself.
Yes, I'm just taking the approach that unless you're Jonathan and hate PWM, the NZ800 is, by all accounts, a better projector. Like, it is. It's not the NZ7 where it had worse anti-contrast. Every single spec, with the exception of, subjectively, the laser dimming isn't as good. The motion isn't as good. But if you're talking like anti-contrast, native contrast, dynamic contrast, all that stuff, better on the NZ800. It's native 4K. It's got 8K shift. The tone mapping's better. It is, by virtually every account, a better projector.
Does it have HDMI CEC?
No, but
I like that.
But it's 3 times the price point.
Yep.
So those are the things that you've got to ask yourself. How much is that fidelity increase worth? To some that are videophiles, it's absolutely worth it. But I did this poll a while ago in the AV Experience Facebook channel, which if you're not a member of, you should join. It's just we try and stay on the objective side of things. I asked, what do you value more, video or audio in a home theater? And I don't think we got anybody that said video. Everybody said audio. And to me, it's the audio. I love video, and I think there is putting the two together creates a great experience.
Yep.
But it's mainly the audio that conveys emotion, right? It's very rarely do you cry when you're looking at a photograph, but it's a lot more common to cry when you're listening to somebody sing. Right. So it's the audio, for whatever reason, that us and humans have a tendency to have an emotional relationship with a lot more. Not saying it's impossible with video or imagery, but I think finding a middle ground of an LS12000, and then maybe later on down the line adding, and I think this is the better way to do it, adding something like a MadVR core to that,
I was just
you're going to
exactly
gain a lot more out of that experience than just putting it all into a display. Because then if you upgrade the display later, well, the video processor, the MadVR is still there. So you've still got that benefit of nonlinear stretch, of subtitle handling, of IP control, of all this stuff that device brings in. You're able to bring in all of those different things, and it's a win-win. Plus, the LS12000 in the core is still less by a third
significantly less
than the NZ8. You're at $10,000 instead of $16,000.
And the LS12000 and the core is approaching the point of the QB.
The only worst part at that point is, I think it's technically worse than ANSI, but the main one is native contrast. But everything else is much, much closer, if not in the LS12000's favor, than from what the core brings into the equation. That's what I would do personally if I were in that.
Or I mean, it just depends what you're going to pull out of the system at that point in time. If you're going to say, I'm going to buy, if I'm going to skimp on subs to buy a bigger projector, I'd say no. If you're going to spend more money, then, well, maybe you might want to, you could consider that. But if it's at the expense of something else.
If all of you were going to buy an acoustically transparent projector screen, what would you buy?
We looked at those samples at your house a month ago.
Mm-hmm.
The Neo and the Sievertson 4K were both really good. We did not have the XY sample, and I've still forgotten to order that.
Did we have the center stage?
We had XD, yes. That's the one with the diagonal coarse grain.
That feels a little more plasticky.
Mm-hmm. So they look very. There's with Ryan's room and the amount of light output he gets. They look very different compared to how they're going to with much less light output.
It's like looking through a screen door.
Certain artifacts become much more apparent. It becomes much more apparent that you don't necessarily see on lower ones. Like I couldn't see the same effects at home on my projector.
Jonathan has the center stage, doesn't he?
Yes.
And it works phenomenally well. You run into a limitation of that material because it is a coarser grain, like it's a coarser weave than a Neo. And the Griffin in my room's at 300 nits. So you can see it. But with something like an
Neo at the wrong bias cut.
But the NZ8 or like an LS12000 looks phenomenal on a center stage XD. Unless you're in Jonathan's room, and then it looks terrible.
I will tell you one other thing. If you've got young kids, the Seymour XD has the added benefit of being like almost like a plasticky coating over the thread.
That is true.
I mean, you can literally. I've had fingerprints on it, Cheeto prints on it. I've had friends that have had that kind of stuff and had to throw away their screen because a normal screen you can't get that out. This is completely like washable with soapy water. So I mean, like I've even had somehow there's some blood on it. I think my kid must have smashed a bug on it or something because there was blood on the screen. It's best I could tell, and it came out like without any. It's not even hard. Like it wasn't scrubbing on it. I just rub it off because it's plasticky.
Yep.
So
it's a coated screen, so it's not going to get into.
That's something to consider if you got kids or animals or something that might make a mess on your screen. But the weave, like they say, the Seymour XD, which is a material I have, you can see the weave from 10-ish feet, depending on your vision. 10-ish foot is kind of average. I sit at about 11 or 12. I don't really see the weave, but I have some friends like Tim, for instance. He says he can see the weave from my seats, but he's got eagle eyes. So, there's that. Where the Neo or the Severson, like you were talking about, those, you're not going to see the weave because it's so small. It's very small thread.
But NZ800 with a 150-inch Seymour XD, I think that'd be a great.
Yeah, it'll be fine, and you'll get a little bit added bonus. You'll get a little bit added bonus from the higher gain on that XD.
Yeah,
I mean, alternatively, if you do want more light because you're already going to be really light limited on that size screen at AT, you could go microperf, and you can do the. Well, there's a couple different ways around it. You can do Seymour does like a micro perf or something now that's less visible.
Yeah, Stewart has one too.
Stewart has one. Yeah. And there's a couple different micro perf options, and they'll be higher gain. I mean, they'll be over Unity because you can take a 1.3 gain screen, micro perf, and they come out to like a 1.1 or something, I believe.
It's like a 10% loss.
And you'll get positive gain, and that's a lot. When you drop to those Weave AT screens, you go to what, like a 0.7?
The Neo's 0.8, but yeah.
But you're taking your, so on with a NZ8 on that 120 inch screen, I get 250 lumens or something by the time I'm running in high with gain.
Nits, you mean, not lumens.
Or nits, sorry. Yes, nits. Nits.
But
I've got an NZ8 with 250 lumens.
But if you take that and you cut your gain in half by going to a 0.7 AT or 0.7 AT screen, now you're at 100. And then you make it bigger and you're going to be at 75.
But that's not necessarily bad.
It's either. Not bad. It's just what you've been exposed to has changed your subjective opinion. I used to watch all the time at about 100, 120 nits.
Bob told me forever that he was like, I only use my projector in low because it's too bright. And then the next time I talked to Bob, he's like, I'm watching at 250 nits in high mode only. Yeehaw.
It's your fault. No, so I did. I've got 1,800 hours on my, maybe even a little more now on my NZ8. And I would say 1,700 of those hours are in we're in low laser or 15% after the update. But that's also a lot of gaming hours. And I generally game at a lower brightness because it's longer term, continuous stare, less blinking, and it's more comfortable to sit in light environment on a lower bright screen. But when I'm watching a movie, I'm liking it significantly brighter now.
300 nits. That's going to be the new CDA recommendation for level 4.
I can't not say that I'm not targeting 300 nits on a very big acoustically transparent screen.
It changes the ball game a bit.
It doesn't look the same when you watch it after having seen some of those big spectral highlights. The experience is totally different. Godzilla breathing laser in your face just is not the same.
So Classy Tech actually brings up a really good point. I'm glad I caught this. He says he just calibrated an NZ8 on a Center Stage XT 140 inch. Came out very good, but would not recommend the color filter from the light loss.
No,
and that's
never.
Something that I definitely agree with. The light loss on the lasers is very different than the light loss on the bulbs. The laser light loss using the filter, and this is the filter that comes down. It's actually a filter that comes down in front of the light element. And it's
20%.
No, it's more than that.
Is
it's
it more?
30. Almost 30. So you're gaining a little bit in the gamut, but it's not worth the light loss, man. I mean, if you take, let's say you're at 100 nits without it, and then you put that down, you're at 70. So I just do not think it's worth it at all in any way, shape, or form.
And he commented about the low noise there on 46% laser. You've got, once content starts playing, you can't hear the difference.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
When you're in a quiet part of the scene or in between scenes or something quiet, yeah, you can hear it. But as soon as anything starts happening, you can't tell the difference. I have a speaker power amp sitting on the floor, just a little standalone one, not one of their bigger ones that I'm using to power the near field right now. And that thing has like a turbine whine fan in it, and it only runs intermittently. And when that thing turns on, it's screaming. But when the movie's playing, you barely can hear it.
Yeah, I'm like the Christie when it turns on high fan. Sounds like a server cabinet in the back of your room, but it doesn't turn on unless you're trying to hit 800 nits and like you're standing in front of a car headlight. Was there one more question?
That's all I got. Looks like the chat's kind of slowed down, so it seems like a good ending place for now.
But I think that was, thanks for bringing that up, Classy Tech. Those were good ending tidbits to go with that conversation. Should we just get classy on stage? Maybe. If we want to talk about video, he could just be a really good liar. No, I think I know who Classy is. And if it is who I think it is, he knows what he's talking about. So, anything in closing? Do we want to go back to the 20K room and stuff next week?
I think so. That sounds like a good topic.
Okay. Bob, are you joining us?
That's up to you guys. You let me know.
Okay.
And sooner than 10 minutes before.
Yeah. Well, I told him he knew already.
I knew already today. I just didn't have a link until 2 minutes before.
It's just my thing with it's always my thing. It's always my problem. And
it's better than last time where it was an hour and a half late.
Yeah. Well, that was my fault probably again in that one. Bruce Barnes says validate. Yeah, absolutely.
I'll have to do homework if that's next time.
Well,
yeah.
Jonathan, the idea is, I hadn't done homework.
The idea was just like if you had 20K to spend, and it's green grass, what would you look into? What would you buy?
And if you're Jonathan and you cheat,
used,
you'll both do used. And you'll do
2 channels,
like a 2-channel in an open concept, and then have a dedicated room, which was totally against what we originally said. And we both agreed. He's like, and just
well, how many options there, and is DIY included?
I think it's fair. Why not?
You want to do DIY?
Why not? Like,
okay,
you got 3 different perspectives. You got 3 different ideas.
All right, fine. The next topic will be 20K. And
we weren't worried about wires, all that kind of stuff. It's just like the big stuff, the big ticket items.
Display, audio processor, subs, and speakers. That's all we talked about. We're not including the room treatments, cables, mounts, furniture. None of that's included. This is just the big ticket items, the ones that most people are going to think about when they come into this. And if you want to include one that kind of comes into the 20K price point, though it's still a little low for this price, this is a video processor, if we can think about that.
2 used Black Swans off eBay. That was what my takeaway from last go round was. Somebody in the chat.
For like $4.50. The price of a Happy Meal was Jonathan's 2 used Black Swans off eBay. Probably with shipping included. They were actually paying him to take them.
Yeah.
Was it what ended up happening?
Found him at the Salvation Army, and was pretty amazed I could pick him up. Traded in some old t-shirts.
I walked into Salvation Army, and they had a 32 infrasonic with amplifier. I gave him a Black Sabbath t-shirt and trade, and they let me come home with it. It was amazing.
Yeah, I love how this is going to work out. My list is going to be awesome.
Imaginary numbers is just Jonathan's thing. I'm going to make a sign and just hold up imaginary, and that's just where we're going to be. But sure, we can do DIY, and since you're going to do it anyway, we can do used, because who cares?
There's no rules.
There's no rules at this point. What about a room build stream, moderate and high budget for new homeowners just starting out and don't know everything involved in the construction? We could potentially talk about that eventually, like more of what we would do in a particular room, given a average space. Like if you had a rectangle or a square, what will we do? We can combine that with these price points, maybe. I think that would be good. We'll get there. Good idea. The more we can help or
put that
mislead the industry.
Put that in our backlog.
We'll get there eventually. Things are going to slow down probably a little bit with the holidays, I would imagine. But we'll see. Are we ever going to be able to get back to Sunday?
Not right now.
Well, I know not right now.
Well, not you and Bob can do it Sunday. I can't do it Sunday.
Yeah, we didn't want you there anyway.
Bye.
Okay. Well, we will we'll go from there. So 20K next week. No rules. Only the major equipment. And we'll see what happens and what sticks. Okay? We'll see what
And it's
more
kind of
my
fun to see what the audience recommends too, because you got those guys opining their choices, and we can kind of broadcast that and talk through those too.
It's
Well-
horrifically subjective on this, and it's things that you've been experienced to, because you're not going to go out there and recommend things in that you've not played around with. And there's so much
Exactly.
gear out there that
Exactly.
Jonathan's just going to start double stacking Behringer PA speakers.
It's the exact same thing. I had it 5,000 times 4.
More 4 times the yellow stickers.
you're going to make a line
That's where
array
we're
of
gonna
them.
go.
Yeah, that's
Oh
right.
God. I'm just imagining
Florida ceiling.
lines of the yellow stickers. Please don't. It's one of the ugliest speakers I've ever seen.
But you put it behind a screen. What do you care what it looks
Yeah,
like?
exactly.
I guess. But then what do you use for your surrounds? You just going to have screens as walls? Is that all you're? That's an interesting concept.
Yes. I mean, what are your walls, Ryan?
Just center stage XD screens.
But you could do, I mean, if you're going to do velvet all around or an AT velvet, I mean, why do I even need to paint the boxes? They can just be plain MDF. I don't
Well,
even need to include.
you could. There's contrast benefits and stuff because light can go through and reflect back. So
Yes.
there is potentially benefits there, but we'll talk about that another time.
Just paint the whole thing in Duratec, right?
Yes. Totally unnecessary. Okay. Till next time. It's been a good evening, gents.
Yep.
I don't think I've got anything else. Bob, you need to wear your red shirt next time.
Then you
Missing
guys are
out.
going to have 2 different colors on, and I'm going to be the person who's in the red shirt.
We should always coordinate. Ryan and I will always have the same color, and whatever Bob is, it will never be the same.
She's going to have to guess.
And then just randomly Bob gets it right.
Oh,
Oh man, that would be good. That would be good. But anyway, guys, I think we'll wrap it up there. 20K next week. We're going to try for Friday. It always gets moved around anyway, so I'm not promising anything. Because it was like, what, 2 minutes before yesterday, and Jonathan texts me and goes,
I worked till 11:30 last
I just finished working, and I responded and go,
And then
I
got called
forgot.
back in.
Because it wasn't scheduled. And I had just gotten the laptop going, and I was all wrapped up and stuff. So anyway, I keep saying this is going to be it, and we keep getting derailed. It is it. Now it's it. So guys, until next time, stay safe out there. Thanks for joining me, guys. It's always great having you here. 20K next week. You guys got anything in closing?
Nope.
Okay.
Now.
Have a good one, guys. We'll see you guys next Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. Never know. I'm going to try and schedule it, but stay safe.